In the dead of night, in the sky of a city, the sounds of Kayden's battle with his rivals echoed. Some flashes of light could be seen. The fight was highly uneven. Kayden was fighting against several enemies. The opponents attacked together and delivered an almost lethal blow, causing Kayden to fall to the ground. Fallen on the ground, with a very serious injury and exhausted after expending a lot of energy in the fight. His breathing was weak, and he was sweating profusely. He needed to quickly find a way to escape unnoticed. Kayden could only think that, if it weren't for the multiple enemies attacking at once, he wouldn't have been in this situation. In the alley, he could sense the presence of the enemies, and knew he needed to do something to restore his energy. At that moment, he hears the yawn of a large cat in the alley. Kayden looks and notices the cat, imagining it might work. He had never done it before, transmuting his body into a cat. The two-tone cat, yellow with white, was lying on some crates, watching the young man's reaction. As Kayden approaches the cat, a huge beam of light envelopes the entire area, completing his transmutation. Dawn breaks over the city. Stores are preparing to open, and the first customer at a pet shop is a very enthusiastic student. He looked at all the cat products with great excitement. Gazing at the shelves, the boy noticed some treats. He could only think about how many cats would love all those new items. He also planned to take advantage of the fact that the shop had restocked a treat he used to love buying some time ago. He paused and thought he wanted to take them all, but there were so many that he didn't know how to do it. He ended up deciding to take them all, making the pet shop owner very excited and happy. Walking back home, he realizes that he had gone out to buy food for himself, but ended up buying only for the cats. But that didn't matter to him. What really mattered was that the cats would be happy with all those purchases. Nearby, while waiting to cross the street, a boy drops his ball. He watches as the ball rolls into the street, and the boy runs after it. He sees the car approaching the boy who was chasing after his ball. He quickly glances at the boy. His eyes widen, and he starts to sweat. He had to do something. With the car's headlights already glaring at the boy, who had frozen in fear, the kind young man hears the screeching of the car's brakes and, like a flash, darts across the street among the people and grabs the boy. Everything happened so quickly. By the time the ball hit the ground, the boy was no longer there. They were now on the sidewalk, out of the street. The boy was safe, and the young man breathed a sigh of relief, hugging him. The boy looked at him, not fully understanding what had happened. The young man checked to see if the boy was alright and thanked the heavens that he wasn't hurt. What a scare he had taken. People on the sidewalk began to comment, asking each other, "Did you see what happened? That was dangerous. Where was the boy?" The child's savior could only think, "I'm glad I was able to save him using my abilities." The boy's mother, checking to see if he was okay, asked if he was hurt, and said she was very worried about him. The child said he was fine and, pointing to the crowd, mentioned that the young man had saved him from the car. However, the mother couldn't distinguish who the young man was in the crowd. He thought that he had used his abilities reflexively, but that day, he had managed to save someone without being seen, though he knew that if he wasn't careful, one day he might be discovered. In the evening, the young man was talking to the cats, telling them that he had been delayed because of an incident. Placing the treats he had bought earlier at the pet shop, he noticed the cats were acting differently. Concerned, he asked the cats what was happening with them. The cats meowed, trying to communicate. He was very worried because none of the cats were eating, and he had bought everything with so much love. One of the cats meowed, catching his attention, and seemed to be distancing itself. He then stood up and began to follow the cat, asking why they were acting strange and not eating today. The cats seemed to want to tell him something, but since they couldn't, they kept walking, and the young man followed them. The young man asked if they wanted to say something and if he should continue following them. The kittens kept meowing, and the young man followed, asking where they wanted him to go. When the cats stopped at an alley but didn't enter it, the young man asked if Alice had already arrived. Looking into the alley, the young man was very startled to see a two-toned cat, yellow with white. Of course, being a cat lover, he didn't hesitate and picked up the cat to take it home. The cat, unconscious after receiving the young man's care, was lying on a bed and slowly began to regain consciousness. Little by little, it managed to open its eyes and saw the ceiling of a house. Soon after, with some effort, it also saw one of its white paws. It lifted its two-toned paw, white with yellow, startled, looking at the image. How did it suddenly have paws? Observing its soft body, it realized that it was now a cat and remembered that, in that moment of desperation. Seeing the soft kitten lying on the crates and with no time to find another body, he had extended his hands to the cat's head and started the transmutation. Using the last of his power, the transmutation was successfully completed. This meant he had succeeded in transmuting into a different life form, like a cat. The large, two-toned cat heard a high-pitched voice saying that he had woken up. It was the voice of the young man who had saved him, who told him that when he found him, he couldn't even stand and was afraid he had died. Very happy, arms wide open and making various gestures, the young man said that now the kitten was fine and didn't need to be scared. The young man, smiling broadly, looked at the cat, but the cat could only think that the child had picked him up while he was unconscious. Very happy and almost unable to believe that the kitten was really okay, the young man asked him to wait a moment and went to get something. However, the cat wasn't the least bit eager for the young man's return, finding it very irritating. The young man returned with 2 bowls in hand, one with treats and the other with cat-safe milk. The young man continued to question the cat, asking why it was in such a state and why it was covered in blood. Although the young man had cleaned and cared for the cat, he wondered for a moment if there might be something he had missed. Pushing the bowls closer to the cat, he said, "Here, kitty, here's your food." Very happy and attentive, the young man told the cat that it could eat everything to get better soon. However, the cat looked at the scene with anger. He was bored with that place. The cat watched with hatred as the young man opened a can of wet treats to put in the bowl and served to his cat. Still talking to the cat, the young man looked at him and asked him to eat everything to get well soon. The young man was very worried about the kitten. The cat then smelled that strong fish aroma and got irritated, wondering if that pest really had the audacity to serve feline food to Kayden. The young man kept insisting, staring at him and asking him to eat to get better soon. The cat also made a very strange face. He didn't like that situation one bit. Lying down, the cat heard his stomach rumble and tremble with hunger. There was no other choice, thought the cat. If they believe I'm a feline, then I'll act like one. He decided he would just drink a little of that milk in the bowl, just to regain his energy. However, while distracted by drinking the milk, he was suddenly grabbed. The young man started to hold the cat up. At that moment, he was determined to check if the cat was male or female. The cat looked at him and said, "What do you think you're doing? How dare you?" The young man heard a firm, masculine voice and looked around, thinking he might have left the television on. Still holding the cat, he asked if the cat had also heard that voice. But Kayden wasn't interested in any of that. He looked at the young man and warned him to let him go immediately, or he'd cut his ears with his claws. The boy's eyes widened, petrified. He didn't know what was happening, but he thought he had heard the cat speak. Leaping back to escape, he wondered if he was really talking to a talking cat. He stayed in the corner, trembling and sweating. "I'm sure I saw this cat talk." The cat, however, warned the boy to start listening to what he was saying. If he didn't stop, he would sink his claws into him. Now, with the boy silent and quiet in the corner, the kitten walked over to him. The boy, scared in the corner with wide eyes, just watched the cat. The cat, in a very frightening tone, asked the boy what his name was. The boy didn't answer, and the cat became more irritated, shouting, "What is your name?" Furious, the cat flattened his ears and, snarling, asked the boy if he really had to repeat it again. The boy finally responded that his name was Jiwoo, and the cat said very well, and asked him to fetch a chair, pointing to it. The boy quickly ran to get the chair to make the cat happy. He placed the chair in a position for the cat to climb up and stepped back a little to observe. As it was difficult for the cat to climb the chair, Kayden imagined that it shouldn't be so hard since he was a skilled cat. With much difficulty, Kayden managed to get the entire mass of the cat's body onto the chair. He thought to himself that it took a long time to climb only because he wasn't yet accustomed to that body. After getting onto the chair, the cat sat down, and the boy just admired him. Kayden, noticing that the boy was looking at him with great admiration, grabbed him by the shirt and warned that if he told anyone, he would kill him. He realized he had been discovered faster than he had imagined, but he was controlling that boy. However, the chair had been placed in front of the mirror, and the reflection of that huge, fat cat caught his attention. Kayden, the bicolor cat, yellow with white, looked in the mirror and asked who that fat cat was. Holding his face, he said that that double chin was enormous and couldn't belong to a cat. Also squeezing his belly, thinking it was very fat, his eyes widened as he realized that the cat reflected in the mirror couldn't be him. He was very disappointed, thinking that fat, disgusting cat couldn't be the great Kayden. Unable to bear the pressure, the cat fell off the chair, and the boy, who had been watching the whole time, rushed to his aid. Thrown on the ground in a severe depression, there was Kayden, the fat cat. The boy, very scared, with the kitten in his arms, asked what had happened because, after shouting, he had fainted. Jiwoo shook the cat from side to side. Kayden didn't respond. He was very upset about having transformed into that cat. The boy begged him not to die. At that moment, Kayden responded to the boy to stop that. The boy asked the cat if he had regained consciousness. Kayden replied that he had never lost it. Putting the cat back on its two little paws, the boy was very happy and told the cat that he was scared when it lost consciousness. Kayden looked at him with a strange look, unable to imagine why this boy would care about him losing consciousness. Jiwoo looked at the cat with much love and admiration, always with a smile on his happy boyish face. On the other hand, Kayden was not happy at all with the cat's body, which he imagined was very obese. Kayden growled and got very stressed, thinking that of all the existences, he ended up in that fat sack of lard. The boy, very happy, asked for Mr. Cat's permission, but Kayden interrupted him, asking to be called by name. The boy said he had a question for Kayden, who asked him to proceed. The boy's question was how he managed to speak. The cat replied that he could speak because he was a person. The boy, repeating the answer, asked if he was a person. Kayden explained that, although he was in a cat's body at that moment, he was a person just like the boy. The boy, full of questions, continued asking Kayden if it was possible for a person to transform into a cat. The cat replied that you could see if it was possible just by looking at him, and that, in theory, he imagined it was possible. The boy's questions, which were many and were getting on Kayden's nerves, came one after another. The boy continued to ask why the cat was in that alley all covered in blood. The cat replied that it wasn't his concern either. Kayden warned the boy that, despite having met in an unexpected circumstance, he didn't need to know more than he already did. The boy said he understood, and after that, there was an awkward silence, interrupted by the cat's stomach growling. The boy tried to convince the cat to eat, telling him that, although he was human, he was now in a cat's body and should eat like a cat. He continued trying to persuade him to eat, saying that human food wouldn't be good for a cat, especially for him, who was recovering. The boy got up and said goodbye to the cat, saying he would go to the alley to feed the other cats, and asked him to eat everything. The cat, looking at the food in the bowls, imagined that the boy was right, as he had heard that human food was bad for cats. He, the great Kayden, was about to eat feline food. He thought he would try just a little to help with his recovery. However, after starting to taste that delicious feline food, with its sweet and aromatic notes, he couldn't stop eating. Kayden delighted in the food from the bowls. He ate so much that after eating, he could only lie on his back. Kayden, after eating all that feline food, refused to believe he had eaten on his own. And in his thoughts, he defended himself, saying it wasn't his fault. It was that fat cat that wouldn't stop eating. He was disappointed with the fragility of that body because he knew that if his enemies found him, he would be in deep trouble. Leaving the house very happy and excited was the boy. Kayden asked if he was going out. He replied that he was going to the veterinary center. The cat found it strange and asked the boy if he was going out at that hour. The boy said yes because he hadn't bought enough food. The boy asked Kayden if he would like to go with him. Kayden, frightened, asked the boy why he would want to go with him somewhere at that hour. The boy replied that if they went together, he wouldn't risk telling people that his cat could talk. The cat told the boy he would go with him only to make sure he kept his mouth shut. The boy was running with him outside, and he wasn't understanding anything up to that point. Kayden wanted to know what was happening and asked the boy to let him go. The boy replied that he couldn't because he was still injured. Kayden, scratching the boy, replied that he didn't want to be carried like a thing or like an ordinary cat. The fight was ugly. Kayden looked at the boy, who still didn't let him go. Kayden told the boy that he wouldn't go out in that undignified manner. Seconds later, the champion was declared. The boy placed Kayden inside his coat, his little face very happy. Kayden was feeling very happy and relieved inside the boy's coat. But he should keep in mind that he was a cat but not a cat. The boy continued walking through the streets at night with Kayden inside his coat, who at that moment wasn't finding it bad at all. They continued like this until they reached the veterinary center, where, greeting the veterinarian, The boy said he had brought the kitten for an exam. The cat realized at that moment that the stupid child had tricked the great Kayden. The veterinarian began the examination with the cat and asked Jiwoo what the cat's name was since he didn't remember seeing it there before. After hearing from the boy that the cat's name was Kayden, the veterinarian commented that for the appearance of that cat, the name was quite magnificent. The cat, in turn, only thought that he should indeed kill that veterinarian who kept examining him. The veterinarian examined the entire cat's body, the mouth, the ear, measured his temperature, and Kayden was annoyed by the embarrassment. The veterinarian told the boy that the cat only had a few scrapes, but the boy had already taken care of those. Hearing the veterinarian's words, the boy felt very relieved, knowing that the cat would now be fine. However, the cat, hearing the boy speak, didn't understand why he was still worrying about him. The veterinarian told the boy that, honestly, all that cat needed right now was a diet, and the cat still thought he should kill that veterinarian. As he said goodbye to the boy, the doctor mentioned that the cat was fine. The two walked through the deserted streets at night, with the boy feeling happy and very relieved. Suddenly, the cat heard something and asked the boy to stop for a moment, warning him that only monster cats lived in that region. Looking at a dark and empty alley, the boy found it very strange that the cat referred to monster cats. He had never heard of that before. However, upon observing the empty alley, the boy noticed that there really was a shadow there, which could indeed be a cat. Frightened by the appearance of that animal, the boy asked if that was the so-called monster cat, hugging his kitten tightly. The boy asked if that beast, which looked a lot like a tiger, was what they referred to as a cat. The boy noticed that the animal indeed exuded a different scent and, looking at the cat, asked what they should do. Kayden told the boy to run as fast as he could. The cat was surprised by the boy's skill in running, as he imagined the boy would just freeze up and be afraid. The boy kept running with his cat in his arms, running and dodging as much as possible from the tiger's attacks. Even while running and dodging, he couldn't avoid being hit by the enormous monster cat. Noticing that Jiwoo had been hit, Kayden asked if he was okay. The boy replied that he was. Kayden commented that it would be better to have a weapon. At that moment, the boy remembered that he had put a weapon in his pocket earlier. It was a stick with a soft puff at the tip. He threatened the big tiger, telling it not to come any closer. At this moment, the boy stood face to face with the big monster cat, pointing the stick with the cute little puff at the end. Kayden was on the ground next to the boy, watching the puff sway on the tip of the stick. Seeing that soft thing swaying on the tip of the stick, he wondered if this was the weapon the boy had managed to get. A few moments, the furious monster cat, which had been trying to devour them earlier, was now calm. So calm that the boy, who had both eyes closed earlier, opened one to see the monster cat's reaction. Seeing the cat swaying from side to play with the soft puff at the tip of the stick, he turned to Kayden and said that now was their chance to escape. However, he realized that the same effect that had affected the monster cat had also caught Kayden off guard. Kayden, when the human engaged in great battles, always left the enemy on the ground, admitting defeat. Comments like, "Kayden won again," and "How many were there?" were common. People would call him to join them. Others asked him to be their right hand. Many times they called him to be part of some plan to conquer the world. Others would kneel, asking him to be their leader. Kayden was snapped back to reality when he heard Jiwoo calling for him, asking what he was doing. The cat stopped playing with the plush on the tip of the stick and looked at the boy. Silence took over, and no one spoke again. The big cat seemed to be preparing. With a well-aimed leap, it managed to grab the plush, making Jiwoo very scared. The animal pulled so hard on the toy that it even managed to take the stick that was in the boy's hand along with it. Despite the boy shouting for it not to take it, the big cat landed on the other side of the alley. Now growling, the animal was in possession of their only weapon. The feline was furious in that corner, salivating and glaring at the two of them. The boy, looking at the big cat, thought about what he would do now that he had lost his weapon. The animal continued to be very angry, growling and salivating. At that moment, Jiwoo recognized a scar on the face of that big feline. He remembered where he had seen that enormous cat before. It was a normal cat when he saw it earlier. The feline, in anger, spat the toy to the other side, landing near the boy sitting on the ground, and it leaped at the boy, who reflexively dodged. Kayden, standing still, began to complain about the clumsy body and behavior of that cat that had transformed. Running, Jiwoo grabbed his cat and ran as fast as he could, increasing Kayden's fright. That big beast had lost sight of them and was breaking and tearing everything it saw in its path. It was growling through the alley, trying to find them, but it didn't see or hear them. Far away, the boy and his cat were, having descended several steps of a staircase. Everything seemed calm, and the boy decided to take a peek by going further up the stairs. He told Kayden that he was right. That was indeed a cat. He wanted to know why it was in the larger form of a normal cat. Kayden said it could be due to anger and a lack of snacks. Jiwoo thought it was safe to leave, but Kayden didn't think it was safe for other people. The boy didn't understand his depressed cat's reasoning, so he explained that the big cat would attack the next people it saw. The boy, surprised, said, "Now what?" He didn't know what to do because he hadn't thought about that before. The cat remained silent, watching quietly, and he told Jiwoo to call the appropriate authorities. The two of them looked at each other, and the boy seemed to be thinking of something. The boy, putting one of his hands on his head, said he had left his phone at home. Kayden said that then he couldn't help. The boy stated that it was just a matter of solving the problem, and that was exactly what they were going to do. Kayden wondered what on earth Jiwoo was talking about, and why he felt the need to do anything. The cat questioned the boy, who still couldn't just sit by, about what he thought he could do. The cat asked why the boy was still arguing. It wasn't his problem if someone got hurt or not. Staying silent and looking at the cat, he understood that the look on that child's face was serious. Watching from the top of the alley stairs, he told Kayden to go home before him. He would see what he could do about the other cat. He was sure that it was the same kitten from before, which was very cute and gentle. Kayden said it was okay if he was really going to do something or help. As he descended the stairs, the boy asked what Kayden had said. The cat explained that it would just be a little more, that he would give a small part of his powers to help. The boy cheered and asked if that kind of thing really existed. Kayden asked the boy to crouch down because he needed to look him in the eyes. The boy crouched, and Kayden, standing 2 steps above him, placed his paws on the boy's forehead. While he touched the boy with his paw, both remained silent, and they both quickly noticed the reaction. Still crouched down, the cat, with its paw on its forehead, began to release small sparks and light. In the alley, the cat on the upper step continued to transfer a bit of its power to Jiwoo. That wave of power was affecting the street lamps and the nearby houses. The boy was very satisfied and could feel the power coursing through his body, and even small sparks coming from his hands. The cat, very tired from transferring the power, explained that the sparks were because it had the power of lightning. Still on the last steps of the ladder, the boy was very pleased with the power, and said he would look for the big cat. However, Kayden warned him that it wouldn't be necessary, as the big cat was already at the top of the ladder. Very confident, the boy asked Kayden to stay behind him, as it could be very dangerous for him. Kayden was very upset after hearing what the boy said, as if he would run away because of some danger. Now, the cat was wondering why that child was suddenly so full of confidence. Jiwoo, silent, only observed the big cat. He asked if it was the same cat that had appeared at his house a few days ago. Despite the monstrous cat at the top of the ladder staring at them, the boy continued talking. The cat prepared and leapt decisively at the boy, who appeared to be unresponsive. Very scared, his cat, watching from the side, urged him to dodge as quickly as possible. The boy watched the wild animal's paw nearly reach his face. The giant cat's attack was precise, but still, it didn't hit the boy, who dodged almost reflexively. After that, both he and Kayden were scared by what had just happened. The enormous beast continued to launch several attacks towards the boy, who dodged each one. The cat, analyzing, realized that the boy wasn't dodging the attacks by mere luck. The boy was reading the cat's reactions and acting before it could hurt him. He attacked without even having a chance to stop for a moment. Still, he wasn't using the powers he had received. He kept dodging the huge cat and waiting for the right moment to use his powers. He couldn't waste the powers on an attack he wasn't sure would hit. The animal came full force at the boy, but that was when he was going to unleash the attack using his powers. The cat's eyes widened as it realized that wasn't the power it had given to the boy. Jiwoo managed to hit that huge beast squarely because it was no match for him. But the final attack would be the end for that great beast. With those blows from the boy, the cat realized he was a user of the speed power. And there was the boy descending from the skies for the perfect attack. Seconds before, he had apologized to Mr. Cat. His strike resulted in a huge flash, leaving him sitting exhausted on the ground and the beast unconscious. The cat, calling the boy, said it was curious about why he wanted so much to fight that battle. Walking over to the boy who was sitting on the ground and the other unconscious cat. The boy was very worried about whether the cat was dead or unconscious. A power surrounded the cat and slowly faded, revealing its original face. Now it was on the ground in its normal form, and the boy recognized it. The three left as quickly as possible, as people were starting to arrive due to the noise. Somewhere in the city, a man was jumping from building to building, stopping on top of one of them. He was worried because the device couldn't locate the species. It hadn't even been an hour since he had located the species somewhere nearby. Now he would have to activate the seal with his abilities, and that was precisely what he was trying to avoid. He had no choice. He wouldn't risk losing that opportunity if the experiment had been successful. Releasing his power, the man high up on the building began to summon the specimen, ensuring that wherever it was, it would return. A little distance from that place, the boy was at home, taking care of the injured animal. Kayden informed the boy that the cat was only slightly electrified. The boy wanted to take it to the vet. Cat didn't think it was a good idea. If the cat transformed again, what would happen at the hospital? The boy, looking at that small animal, knew his cat was right but was still concerned. "It's better this way. Stop complaining. He'll be fine," Kayden said to Jiwoo. For a moment, Kayden remained silent, looking at the animal on the sofa. He didn't know it could transform. He continued thinking that a regular cat wouldn't do that on its own. It seemed like an awakened being. The boy was trying to tell his cat his secret but couldn't find a way. Losing patience, the bicolor cat asked what he was trying to say. The boy was trying to explain what he had done in the fight against the striped kitten, and Kayden asked if it was about his speed. The boy confirmed and asked his cat to keep it a secret. Kayden was listening attentively. The boy continued, saying he wouldn't like others to know. The cat didn't like it at all and said not to go around telling people he had awakened abilities. Jiwoo didn't know what awakened abilities were and asked his cat what they were. The cat found it strange that he didn't know what they were since he was awakened. The boy was shocked to learn what it was. The bicolor cat observed the boy for a while in silence, just analyzing. It concluded that he really had no idea he was an awakened one, and said there were rare cases like his. Excited, the boy wanted to ask a question and even raised his hand to do so. He asked if he was something called an awakened one, and if that speed ability was something awakened people had. After these questions, Kayden knew it wouldn't be easy to explain all this to him. Taking a breath, he answered yes. The boy wanted to know if there were people like him, other awakened ones. His bicolor cat answered yes, and that he was looking at an awakened one right there. He could hardly believe his cat was also an awakened one. He asked if the cat had special abilities like him. Was that what the bicolor cat was saying? He asked if he really thought a normal person could transform into a cat like he did. The boy, having his cat's affirmative response, was stunned and very emotional, even going silent. The cat noticed the change in Jiwoo's face, who was now silent, especially since he never shut up. Moving to the side, he took a good look at the boy to make sure he was okay. Very emotional, the boy began to apologize for crying. He had always thought he was the only abnormal one. The cat asked if up until that moment, the boy hadn't told anyone about his special abilities. With the boy's affirmative response, the cat could understand him. Being awakened and wanting to live among others wouldn't be easy. He told the cat that even after his mother discovered his abilities, she asked him never to use them. He continued, saying he was always scared but didn't tell his mother to avoid worrying her. He imagined that if they found out, they might kidnap him and experiment on his body. His cat continued standing there, watching him and listening to his stories. In tears, he said he was happy to know there were others like him, not just Mr. Kayden. The bicolor cat, turning its face, commented that it also felt a certain relief. After these stories, the three remained silent in the room, Kayden facing Jiwoo, while the striped cat recovered on the sofa. The boy broke the silence, asking his bicolor cat to teach a bit more about the awakened ones. Kayden began explaining that people with special abilities are called ability users or awakened ones. He understood. It was like the heroes in movies. Depending on their abilities, they could do different things. Kayden explained that the core of his ability was moving at high speed, but he could do more with that speed. The boy asked if, over his life, his powers had become more powerful, and he explained that they had. Excited, he said that lately, he could use them for 3 to 5 seconds. The cat said it understood because he hadn't trained his abilities. He was trying to hide them. He was curious and asked if all awakened ones trained their abilities. Kayden replied that they did. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he said he still wanted to continue hiding his abilities. Watching the boy get embarrassed about wanting to hide his abilities, Kayden said he was a special case, and soon heard his stomach growling. The boy apologized for interrupting Kayden with the growling of his stomach and said he hadn't eaten since dinner. He asked for a moment to grab something to eat, leaving the room and going to the kitchen. He grabbed a slice of bread from the table, which was next to the room with no walls separating them. As he was about to bite into the bread, he noticed his cat watching him from the sofa. He turned to make sure it was really the cat, and saw the cat looking, both of them silent. He immediately put some kibble in the bowl so his cat could eat as well. Crouched down next to the cat's food bowl was Jiwoo, realizing that his bicolor cat hadn't eaten either. Kayden wasn't satisfied. He needed to eat cat food again while Jiwoo was supporting him. Staring at the food bowl in silence, he seemed to be gathering the courage to eat. He realized he had no other option. He was hungry, and that was the only alternative. The boy also began eating his food. Sitting on the floor, eating his bread, he watched his cat eating its kibble, while the other cat was also recovering there. Slowly, an energy began to cover Jiwoo's neighborhood, gradually taking over the houses and streets. It was the ability of the man who was on top of the building searching for his specimen, the striped cat on the boy's sofa. Kayden, sensing something, quickly turned around. He was feeling better and managed to sense something coming. He felt that energy surrounding the house and knew it was bad. At the window, he confirmed it was energy and started to assess what it was. He was interrupted by a familiar sound, a powerful growl. Turning to the sofa, he saw the striped cat, which had now turned back into that furious beast. The boy also saw the large striped cat, which this time wasn't trying to attack them but was instead trying to escape. It knocked over everything in its path, looking for a way out. And when it found one, it leaped and took off, seeming to be in a hurry. This was unexpected and left both of them confused about what had made the striped cat become monstrous again. The boy, astonished, told Kayden that the cat had fled, and Kayden said it was impossible not to notice that. Kayden knew that the striped cat shouldn't be on its feet yet since it hadn't recovered. This had to do with that energy. He noticed that the boy was preparing for something, even putting on a cap. Suspicious, he asked Jiwoo what he was doing, even though he already had an idea of the answer. Putting the cap on his head, the boy replied that he had to find the beast cat to avoid hurting anyone. The cat wanted to know if the boy was going to hunt the monster cat again and warned that the first time was unavoidable. But now it wasn't. The boy cared about people, but what he really wanted was to help the striped kitten. He wasn't going to let anything happen. The cat observed the boy and was sure that if he left him alone, the situation would get much worse. So, he took a deep breath before telling the boy that he would go with him. He wanted to know why the striped cat had changed, and the boy was very happy about that. Seeing the boy's joy, the cat warned him not to misunderstand. He was not going because he cared about him. The two went outside, with the boy thanking the cat and saying he felt better with him. Outside, that strong energy still lingered, which had made the striped cat transform and run away. The boy, at full speed, was running to find the transformed cat, which represented a significant threat. He was carrying Kayden inside his jacket, who noticed that his movements were as good as before the fight. He continued talking to Jiwoo from inside the jacket, sure that speed could be awakened. Running, he had indeed noticed he was faster and wanted to know about these other abilities. He explained that the parts of his body affected by movement would continue to develop, such as his nervous system. He was understanding his cat's explanation when Kayden asked him to turn left, and that's what he did at high speed, holding his cat inside the jacket. Kayden asked how long he could stay active. He replied that since it had been a few hours since he last ran, he thought he could last for 2 seconds. Kayden was analyzing the answer while being carried inside the jacket. Running, the boy asked about the direction to go, and how he knew which way to take. Kayden knew because parts of the energy presence that had surrounded the house were still in the air. His guess was that the incident was related to an awakened one, and that the monster cat was going to meet him. Amazed, the boy asked if it was another like the two of them. Kayden told him to get ready. It was all silent, but the bandages used in the feline's treatment were lying on the ground. The large cat was walking almost unable to, responding to the call of the awakened one who had summoned him. That man appeared in the shadows, saying that the specimen had shown up after hearing his call. Looking at the monster cat, he told it that it wouldn't be able to escape those cells in its current state, making the large cat remember the captivity and the bad man conducting experiments, using it as a guinea pig. Not understanding the specimen's reaction of not surrendering, even with the seal ensuring its obedience. The large cat showed it wasn't being fully controlled and growled at the man who was crouching in front of it. The man noticed the hostility and realized that the seal placed during the procedure had broken. Observing the specimen growling and staring at him, he saw that it had become stronger. For the victory of the awakened one observing, as an experiment had managed to awaken the cat. The boy arriving at the location pointed out by Kayden saw the striped cat he was searching for with a man, and showed Kayden where they were. His cat observed the scene, trying to recognize the man with the monster cat. He realized something was troubling him, which even scared the boy, making him tremble. Pulling Jiwoo to hide for now until they were sure who it was. Hidden, Kayden took a good look, and seeing it too, observed with the boy that the striped kitten from before was there. As he looked, he only saw a man. The cat explained to him that it was an awakened one. But the boy, looking, saw nothing different about the man who was facing the cat he was searching for. Analyzing the man, the bicolor cat noticed the connection between them. He was convinced that the earlier energy was for a summon. Looking, he realized it wasn't one of the trackers searching for him, and felt relieved. From the way that man's powers flowed, he was only there for that large cat. The striped cat leaped towards the man. That enormous cat wanted to attack him. Noticing he was about to be attacked, the man extended one hand, freezing the cat in midair. Then he threw it against the wall. It was a strong specimen and didn't die easily. The monster cat, after hitting the wall, landed on its feet. It was badly injured and exhausted. Even so, that awakened man attacked him fiercely with his powers, asking if he was sure of himself. He threw him against the wall again. This time, he couldn't land on his feet, nor could he get up. Even with that man ordering him to get up, the striped cat was too injured and couldn't move anymore. A little further ahead, Jiwoo saw what the man was doing to the cat. With him, Kayden saw how skilled that man was. Undoubtedly a very strong awakened. Kayden noticed in the subtle movements of his hands that he had such control over his own powers. The man was still not satisfied and asked the cat lying on the ground if that was all it had. With the striped cat on the ground, hurt and smaller, it was still angry. The man made his assessments and realized that the cat had gained greater physical strength and was stronger than an ordinary cat. Looking at the cat lying on the ground, the man kicked it and said that it had not been defeated yet. The boy, adjusting his cap, didn't know what was happening, but he wasn't going to just stand by. He was going to save the striped cat. Kayden tried to persuade him, saying that the man was an awakened and warned that Jiwoo was no longer in the same situation as when he fought with the cat. Jiwoo didn't care if the man was awakened or not. He knew that no one had the right to do what that guy was doing to the kitten. "Stop being naive," said the angry cat. "Kayden, what do you think you can do?" Jiwoo was listening to him and was aware of the risk he was about to face. Kayden spoke a lot, trying to convince him, saying it was impossible to win and that he should get that into his head. He watched the boy silently for a brief moment and even thought he had managed to convince him. The striped cat got up and stood in front of that man, who was surprised to see that it was still able to snarl so fiercely. The man looked at the specimen and asked why it wasn't fleeing, saying that trying to attack him was disappointing. He was still speaking when, seeing the opportunity, Jiwoo moved very quickly towards the cat. He crouched quickly in front of the awakened, grabbed the badly injured feline, and the man hadn't even seen him arrive. He was furious with him for trying to steal his experiment like that, and worse, catching him off guard. He launched a wave of power towards the boy who was trying to steal his experience. However, before it could reach him, the boy had already left the scene right before his eyes. He searched all around and couldn't see him. He was there and disappeared in less than a second. That man was fearing he had been found by a tracker. He knew he shouldn't have spread all that energy. He thought he had been discovered and needed to leave before the other trackers arrived. Now the place was empty. Jiwoo fled with Kayden and the striped cat while the man fled from the potential trackers. Far from there, the boy was running with the cat in his arms, and Kayden, furious with him, heard that they had succeeded. Running, Kayden complained, and Jiwoo looked at the unconscious striped cat in his arms. Smiling, Jiwoo didn't care, as he wouldn't leave the striped cat with that man even if he was dead. He had now managed to annoy his bicolor cat, who looked at him with reproachful eyes. Jiwoo replied, looking at him, that he had to try. He couldn't just stand still. The cat running watched. He was serious, and the worst part was that he was serious. With the striped cat wrapped in his coat, All smiles, Kayden told him to stop being an idiot and to stop laughing. Drooping his ears, he realized that the boy was hopeless. But who would have thought they actually succeeded? The boy, even knowing he annoyed his cat, told him he was very happy at that moment. Jiwoo said that, on that day, he had learned about the powers he had wanted to hide so much, and, shortly after that, had the strength and determination to act. Looking at the striped kitten in his arms and running to his house with Kayden, the cat told that wasn't a reason to be proud. Now, at the awakened man's hideout, who had also fled, he was enraged. That specimen was very important. Turning to Woon, he said he thought there were trackers on their trail and that he had taken the important experiment. Listening to the master's instructions, Woon, a very young and obedient boy, was attentive. Putting his paw on the body of the striped cat, Kayden was trying to heal it and ease its suffering with his abilities. Despite his efforts, the animal's body was very injured. Its recovery could take longer than expected. The boy looked closely at Kayden caring for the striped cat, which was lying on the couch and everything it had been through. Kayden finishing the treatment, he removed his paw from the striped cat's body, had done his part. Now it was just waiting for recovery. That cat had gone through the awakening process and was now strong enough to survive. The boy was happy that the striped cat was also like them and now thought it was cooler to call him a smart kitten. Looking at the kitten, Kayden imagined that it couldn't be a full awakening, but its body emitted the right aura. He continued analyzing the smart kitten and remembered past cases of animal experiments. So this cat was the first successful one, which meant it was the work of that man. And he knew they had gotten involved in something dangerous. Seeing his dear cat friend standing still for a while, he asked Kayden if he was okay, as he didn't seem to be. With a sweat on the head, Kayden replied that of course he wasn't okay and they had gotten involved in something complicated. Jiwoo said he had also thought about that, but what could he do? He couldn't ignore the kitten and let it die. He said he rescued the kitten. It wasn't the case. The problem arose when he decided to confront the man. And to make matters worse, he forcibly took his cat. That man would definitely come after him. Jiwoo, who only looked at him, slightly hunched, was very scared when he started shouting. He tried to explain to the angry bicolor cat that he had only saved the kitten and hadn't angered the man. Kayden was really upset with that idiot who had no idea of the mess he had just gotten into. Seeing the cat once again standing there with an angry look, Jiwoo glanced to the side of the cat to see, but he remained lost in his thoughts. The cat knew that to cover up the case, they wouldn't hesitate to kill him. It was a lot of bad luck for something like this to happen to him, who had just discovered his powers and got into this situation. In reality, he still needed to be treated like a normal human. After all, it wasn't like anything would change if he explained. The boy looked at the cat sitting on the couch with drooping ears. He asked Kayden if he was angry and said he was very sorry for making things up in his head. The cat yelled at the boy, who wasn't acting out of concern for him, scaring the boy. He continued talking with all that anger to Jiwoo, saying it was indeed dangerous because the situation was risky. Pointing his paw at him, he asked if he understood what he had just explained. Whatever Kayden said, just be careful from now on. The result of your actions made you gain an enemy. Jiwoo laughed at the situation. The cat could only think about how this naivety could be problematic. Suddenly, the alarm on the cell phone started ringing. Time had passed, and they didn't even realize it. Jiwoo, looking at the phone, saw that it was already 7 in the morning. The cat didn't understand why 7 o'clock was so surprising. As he hurried to get ready to leave, Kayden wanted to know where Jiwoo was going and mentioned that he hadn't finished talking. The cat looked incredulous, not knowing that Jiwoo was a student and finding it strange. Jiwoo explained that he had stayed up all night taking care of the cat's situation, already putting food in the bowl. Leaving quickly, he said he had left a bunch of food, so they shouldn't forget to eat. Standing at the door, he remembered something important and asked his cat. Noticing the boy's excitement when he approached the door, the two-colored cat became curious to know what was going on. Looking at Kayden, his two-colored cat, the boy asked what they would do if the smart kitten woke up while he wasn't there. The two looked at the unconscious cat, and Kayden said that, in that state, it would be difficult, since he didn't remember being much weaker than the last time they faced each other. Besides, Kayden continued, what made Jiwoo think he was capable of defeating him? Very proud of the cat, Jiwoo thought Kayden was incredible, and the cat began to say that he had heard those words countless times in his life. He didn't know the cat was so strong. He remembered that now Kayden was a fat cat. Saying goodbye, he ran off to avoid being late for school, but returned because he had something important to ask. The cat was already returning to his position at the door, calling the cat, who couldn't believe the boy had already come back with more questions. Jiwoo asked if he would still be there when he returned. He hadn't been apart from him since finding him in the alley. He said that his body wasn't well yet, so he should stay a little longer, at least until he got better. Watching him run off again, yelling for Kayden to stay and promising that he would. The house was now silent after he left, and the two colored cats stood in the middle of the room, staring at the door. Since Jiwoo had begged so much, Kayden decided to stay a little longer, talking to himself as he passed by his reflection. He stopped and stared at that reflection of the two-colored cat, wondering what kind of nonsense it was. His thoughts were interrupted by the unwelcome arrival of 3 alley cats, and now he wanted to know what was going on. They started approaching him with unfriendly looks, clearly not pleased with his presence. They decided to rub against him, sniffing, and Kayden found it all very annoying. One of them moved toward the food bowl, and he told them not to steal the food from the great Kayden. Suddenly, all of them bristled with fear. It was the two-colored cat releasing a powerful aura that illuminated the area. The 3 alley cats huddled together, trembling in fear of the cat. He remembered the words Jiwoo had said when he told him that he had only found him because the cats had led him to Kayden. He stopped emitting that energy, walked past the cats, and looked for a place to lie down. The cats watched to see if the furious cat wasn't going to attack them, and they started eating cautiously. They looked at Kayden, lying on his back, and occasionally he looked back at them too. His stomach was growling with hunger because he hadn't eaten and had left his food for the other cats. Looking up at the table, he noticed that there was a canned cat food there. Grabbing the can and lying down with it on the floor, he examined it, wondering how he would open it. Looking at his claws, he had a brilliant idea and used them to open the can. The big cat managed to open the can of treats, and the smell filled the air, making him happy. However, the smell also caught the attention of the 3 cats behind him, who were eating from his bowl. Those 3 cats watched Kayden with admiration, seeing him open that can. Some time passed, and the boy was already back home. Excited, he announced to his cat Kayden that he had returned. But he was very startled to see several cans of that treat open and all the cats lying down, asleep. He looked at each can, wondering how they could have managed to open the container, and he noticed that all the cans had a lateral cut. Even so, he couldn't connect those lateral cuts with the cats lying on the floor. In his childhood, many questions ran through his mind, and his mother tried to answer them as best she could. He always asked if it was his fault for being different, and his mother would say it wasn't anyone's fault. But he wanted to know, if it wasn't his fault, why were they always running away? Many times, his mother didn't know what to say and stayed silent, and the boy's questions kept coming. He wanted to know why no one wanted to be his friend. For that question, his mother had no answers either. She didn't always have answers for all his questions. At those moments, she would hug him, trying to comfort him with a hug. She hugged him as tightly as she could, trying to cheer her son up. He realized that not even his mother really knew what was happening to him. He would always watch other kids his age playing from a distance, as they didn't like his presence. He was always alone. No one approached him, thinking he was different. But one day, someone noticed him and started looking at him differently, without fear. He looked to the side and saw that it was a kitten looking at him with affection, and the gentle kitten, approaching him, rubbed against him and meowed close to the boy. At first, the boy was scared of the little animal, but over time he got used to it. The teacher called his name in the classroom, as he was sleeping at his desk. But he remained asleep, and now he was there, standing in front of a beautiful kitten. He looked at the cat, and the cat looked back at him, and he decided to place his hand on the cat's head. He reached out, hesitated, until he finally gathered the courage and petted the cat. Feeling the soft fur and hearing the cat purring was the best remedy he could have hoped for. He was smiling at last. The boy who was always sad in the corners now had a friend and was happy. The boy and his cat were together and chatting excitedly. Once again, a firm voice called his name and asked if he was really sleeping in class. Startled, he raised his head, blinking and trying to figure out what was happening. The teacher, annoyed, told him that he tried to let it go, but since Jiwoo had slept in class the previous day too, he couldn't anymore. Still a bit dazed, he asked the teacher if the class had ended, as it seemed like he was hearing the bell. The teacher confirmed that the class was over, and the bell had just rung. Teacher asked if something was wrong and said that if Jiwoo had a problem, he could talk to him. Jiwoo understood that the class had ended, so he got up and left. He ran out of the classroom, telling the teacher he was already leaving everyone in the room shocked. The teacher looked back, surprised, not knowing what was going on with that boy who had always been so good. Hearing his name, even so, the boy didn't stop running. He ran as fast as he could to leave. He rushed out, all excited, because he imagined that Kayden was waiting for him. He was in such a hurry to get home that he didn't even notice a boy in front of him and bumped into him. Awkwardly, he apologized to the boy for hitting him, as he had been distracted, thinking about the cat. He tried to explain that it happened because he was in a rush, but the other boy looked at him indifferently and said nothing. Jiwoo is completely ignored by that boy, who simply walks away and leaves. He lingers a little longer, watching the boy depart, looking at him from behind. He thought it was strange the boy didn't say anything, and if he remembered correctly, he was a transfer student from his class. Shouting at the boy, who was already walking away, he apologizes and says he really needs to leave, then runs off. Through the hallways, the boy walks slowly, as if in no hurry to get anywhere. That boy, named Woon, works for the Awakened One who was using the cat as an experiment. Hearing his cell phone ring, he answers and hears his name followed by the question of where he was, coming from his boss. He responds that he was at school, and the boss becomes very angry with him, saying they had a lot to do. In that hallway, listening to the boss's complaints, he looks at the court and sees people playing, but he wasn't like them. The boss tells the boy that trackers are looking for them, and yet he keeps going there. He also tells the boy to stop wasting time with frivolities and to return immediately to their hideout. He replies, "Yes, sir." The call ends, and he continues walking down the hallway. From a distance, he sees happy people, enjoying themselves with friends, a happiness he could not experience. With that sight, he adjusts his glasses on his face and keeps walking slowly. Meanwhile, at Jiwoo's house, there were 5 cats, the 3 alley cats, Kayden, and the striped cat with powers. The striped cat wakes up and notices the environment. He had been there before, on that same couch. Looking closely, he sees 3 cats playing that weren't there the last time. They notice that the other cat had woken up. The 3 cats, trying to interact with him, approach. One even meows near the striped cat, who flattens his ears. As one of the alley cats tries to touch the striped cat while meowing, he is left alone. The striped cat growls, scaring the curious kittens, who were just checking on him. The striped cat bristles, rising from the couch and continuing to growl at the kittens. The 3 run away in fear, huddling together. The striped cat was recovering, but still, he frightened them. The striped cat begins gathering energy to attack the kittens huddled in the corner. He approaches them, growling loudly, making the 3 tremble with fear. The striped cat paces back and forth, growling and preparing for an attack. Then, he leaps at the 3 defenseless alley kittens with full force. However, his attack is stopped midair when Kayden strikes him in the face with his paw. Kayden was also in the air, charging at the striped feline to protect his alley cats. He owed them that much. After finishing his strike, Kayden watches as the striped cat collapses unconscious on the couch, to the delight and relief of the 3 kittens. Having knocked the striped cat out, Kayden, glaring at him angrily, asks what he thought he was doing in his house. The other cats went wild with excitement. They all liked him and were there because of him. Now it was a matter of admiration. 2 of the 3 cats began rubbing against him, meowing at him, while the other was poking the striped cat to make sure he was truly unconscious. The cats continued to fawn over Kayden, worshipping him like he was king of the place, until they heard a voice saying, "I'm back." It was the boy all the cats loved. At that moment, they stopped adoring Kayden and rushed to get pets from Jiwoo. He was happy to see them there and began asking how their day had been. From a distance, the bicolor cat watched the boy and the cats. Kayden seemed annoyed by the attention the boy was giving the other cats, but he didn't get close either. The boy, looking at the bicolor cat, asked if they had eaten while he was away. He told him that, even if he didn't like cat food, he should force himself to eat at least the wet food. Looking at the empty cans, Jiwoo realized they had eaten well and he had worried for no reason. With the 3 cats still around him, and Kayden in a bad mood, Jiwoo glanced at the sofa to check on the striped cat. Rising towards the couch, Jiwoo said that the striped cat was the one he was most worried about. He felt sad that the cat hadn't woken up yet. Jiwoo asked if the cat hadn't regained consciousness at all, but Kayden avoided the question. When asked directly, Kayden finally revealed that the striped cat had woken up once but didn't specify how. Overjoyed, with happiness shining in his eyes, the boy wanted to know when that had happened. Kayden, the bicolor cat, responded that it was just before he returned home. Now Jiwoo felt a bit more relieved. For him, it was a great relief that the cat had woken up, even if only for a brief moment. The cat, however, mentioned that he had something to ask Jiwoo for a long time, but it seemed like he wasn't the owner of the 3 kittens. He concluded by asking, "If you're not their owner, why do you have so many cat things in the house?" Said that he might be disappointed by the answer. Wisely, Kayden responded that he'd be the judge of that. A bit embarrassed, Jiwoo looked at the kittens and began speaking. He said that when he was younger, he had no friends, and Kayden could already imagine why. Jiwoo's family was always moving around, so he had no way to maintain friendships, especially since he had to stay distant from other kids. So, he was very lonely. The first friend he ever had was a cat, and he said this while picking up one of the 3 alley kittens. The kitten, like his first friend, was a street cat, but one day that cat disappeared. Jiwoo searched until he couldn't anymore, but sadly, his family moved away from that place. Looking at the unconscious striped cat on the couch, Jiwoo continued, saying he bought toys and food for the cats, all the ones who lived there. With one of the kittens in his arms, he admitted that it was kind of silly and smiled at Kayden, who remained silent. Flicking his ears in indifference, the bicolor cat said, "It's not a big deal." Changing the subject, Jiwoo mentioned that he was really tired and had even slept during class. His cat explained that it was because he still hadn't fully recovered. "Oh, so that's it," Jiwoo replied. He had thought it strange that he was still so exhausted and hadn't regained his energy. On the floor, with some cats stretching out and already setting up a pillow to prepare for a nap, Jiwoo called out to Kayden, looking at his bicolor cat, and told him he was really happy he was still there. He remembered that Kayden had said he would stay until he recovered and asked him to promise again that he would stay. The cat stared at him, said nothing, then, as Jiwoo was getting ready to lie on the couch, told him to forget about it and just sleep. Jiwoo lay on the floor with his head on the pillow, each of the 3 alley cats in their own corner, the striped cat on the couch, and Kayden on another. When Kayden turned to check if Jiwoo was alright, he felt upset. 2 of the alley cats were curled up next to him, sleeping very close, while the other was playing with some toy fish. Extremely exhausted, the awakened was repeatedly trying to redo the experiment that had succeeded before. He could try anything, but he wasn't achieving the same success as before. Even using the same drugs, the effect was very different. He asked Won if he was sure that all those animals he had used as test subjects were really dead. Won replied that he had checked each one twice every hour. Putting his hands on his head, the man looked desperate to make sure everyone had died. The young man, aware of the awakened strong temper, remained silent, waiting for the next orders. The man, crouched and looking at the cells where the lifeless animals were, said that soon they would come looking for results, and that there were trackers. He stayed silent, with his hands on his head, crouched near the cells. He was sweating and looked more desperate with every moment. He ordered Won to fetch more test subjects so they could start the procedures again. He was going to redo the tests. Serious, the young man replied that those were the last animals they had in stock. The man, still crouched, looked at him with utter contempt. There was hatred in his gaze, as if blaming him for the lack of test subjects. He stood up, very angry, and asked if they had used them all, then go get more. The man was desperate and couldn't afford to waste another minute. The young man reported that people were starting to get suspicious in the neighborhood, and with so many disappearances, the police were already on alert. The monstrous man told the young man to shut up and struck him, venting all his anger and frustration. His thoughtless attack hit the young man's face directly, who didn't even move or utter a single word. The blow made his face bleed. Even so, nothing could be heard from Won's mouth. The old awakened then asked the young man whom he thought he was talking to. With a respectful voice, the young man said he was very sorry. Looking at the young man, he shouted that if there was no way to get them in the neighborhood, he should go to the more distant areas but bring them to him. Furious, He said that the young man really had to detail everything for him to do something right. Turning his back to Win, he called him a useless fool. The young man remained standing. The old desperate man thought that the young man had no idea how hard it was to make any progress in that type of experiment. Returning to Jiwoo's house, which was in complete silence, the striped cat was still unconscious on the sofa after the paw to the face it received. The boy, very tired, was sleeping on the floor near the sofa where the striped cat was, and the alley cats were lying with him. On the other sofa, Kayden was concentrated, meditating to check his strength and energy. He was doing exercises to increase his power. His energy was low. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't gather much energy. His body wasn't recovering. He slowly opened his eyes, stretched his limbs, and sharpened his claws. That cat form was still bothering him. His strength wasn't returning. Now, he wasn't recovering at all. And the worst part was that he had used powers beyond the body's capacity. He remembered that it could have been because he had transferred some of his powers to a boy moments before his fight against the monster cat. He thought of Jiwoo's cheerful face, and would do it again to keep him safe. That boy was always very kind to him and everyone around him. There was no other option at that moment. If he hadn't helped, who knows? He remembered the awakened and knew that the bastard would still cause problems. He wouldn't stay calm after being robbed and challenged. Not just anyone would have the courage to conduct a strictly banned experiment in the awakened world. He thought that if he were lucky, the old man would flee soon. Otherwise, he would go after them. And he began to observe that the boy was tossing and sweating, but was trapped in a very bad nightmare. He couldn't stop thinking that Jiwoo was in great danger now, with that crazy man out there after his experiment. Observing the boy tossing, sweating, and appearing to breathe with difficulty, the cat was sure it was indeed a very bad nightmare. And he thought it was no wonder, having discovered the awakened world and having to face one of them. Calling the cat by name, he warned that he wasn't breathing anymore. When the boy said he couldn't breathe and that something was squeezing him, the cat remembered to say that he was on top of his stomach. After the other cats looked at him and realized that he was the cause of the boy's difficulty in breathing, he was sweating with embarrassment. Widening his eyes, he got off the boy's stomach, trying to adjust while the boy still felt the effects of all that weight on his chest. The boy was sitting, gasping for air and breathing with great difficulty, while the cat, sitting close to him with drooping ears, thought about how he ended up on top of him. The boy told the cat about the terrible nightmare, saying that someone was on top of him trying to strangle him. The cat, at this moment, looked at him with a terrible expression. Looking at the cat, the boy found the cat's reaction strange to the nightmare description. The cat became furious and turned his face to the other side. The boy said he still felt the weight on his chest. The cat retorted, saying that he knew it was just a nightmare due to the things happening to him in recent days. Jiwoo commented that the things he had said wouldn't leave his mind, and the cat also remembered the experiment he had stolen from the awakened. The boy, very sad and discouraged after that scare of thinking he was really being strangled, said he also remembered that. The cat, with a lot of irony, said he didn't know the boy had heard him, because it didn't seem like he was laughing at that moment. The cat looked at the boy and sighed deeply, thinking about all the consequences of the boy's thoughtless actions. He put his hand on his face and scratched with 1 or 2 fingers, looking at the cat and imagining he had figured everything out. He looked at Kayden with a look of tenderness and thanked him for being so concerned about him. He continued by saying that he knew he should feel bad because of the many problems for the cat, but still, he didn't know why he felt good. The cat's first reaction was to stay silent and visibly emotional. He was happy, but didn't show it, knowing that the boy was grateful. But it didn't last long, and the cat became furious, shouting at the boy to shut up and saying who told him he was worried about him. He made it clear that he wasn't worried about him, as he didn't have the time the boy had. He was only thinking about himself. The boy stayed quietly in a corner, observing the cat and wondering if he had really misunderstood. The cat wanted to say some things to him that he had also been thinking about for some time. It was a way to effectively increase his skills, to make him stronger and more prepared for any eventuality. Going down to the basement to start the training, the boy asked the cat if it was really possible to do that. The cat became angry, telling him that that was what he was saying. Sitting on a sofa in the basement, the cat said that this room could serve for the training. The cat informed the boy to prepare himself because they were going to start the training, and it would be good for him. He said that until that moment, the boy had been using his awakened abilities blindly, and could develop them with unregulated use. He mentioned that if the boy used the method he was going to teach, his abilities would become better and greater, allowing him to control his powers. He also made it clear that things don't happen immediately. Sometimes it could take months, or even decades. He said that abilities took time to develop fully. He commented that factors like method, training, capacity, and talent would have a significant influence. The boy then asked if it was possible that he might not develop anything. The cat said he wasn't sure. It would depend on his talents. He explained that developing skills was one thing, and using them efficiently was another. The boy asked how long it took Kayden to achieve that. Proud of himself, the cat responded that the boy was talking about something he had created for himself. He asked the boy to come a little closer to the sofa where the cat was, as he needed to be near him and look into his eyes. Then, he did almost like before, placing his paw on the boy's chest and began listening to the heartbeat. Afterwards, he started gathering energy and gradually surrounding the boy with it. The boy thought it was like the last time when the cat had given him part of his powers. Kayden asked the boy to listen carefully and explained that the roots of awakened abilities were gathered in the heart. He said he would insert his own energy into the boy's heart to facilitate the circulation of his own energy, which would help the boy use his powers better. He asked the boy to always remember this, and he replied that he would, sir, and would remember the words. He warned that he was going to start, and continued to gather his energy in the boy's heart, more and more. The boy began to feel a slight pain, as if being lightly electrocuted. Kayden gradually increased the intensity, knowing what he was doing. He increased it a little more but was going slowly, as he wasn't in a hurry. The technique involved a little energy at a time. He was moving to a high level of energy. As the boy's body adapted, he increased the amount of electricity passing through him. At this moment, he realized that Jiwoo was feeling a lot of pain and asked him to endure it, knowing that this was the way. The boy was coping very well so far and was increasing the brightness of the light surrounding him, conducting the electricity until he got used to it. Little by little, the boy was engulfed by flashes of light. Now, the boy was completely enveloped by that energy and light and was very tired. The cat was also very tired and said it would be very difficult to repeat all that for now. The boy, noticing how tired the cat was concerned about what might happen if he repeated this effect for several months. By moving his arm, he managed to gather energy in his hands and, very happy, asked Kayden if this was what he had just shown him. The cat, very tired and feeling depleted, was still astonished to see that the boy had learned so quickly. He was happy because the boy could move his energy just as the cat had taught him, and happily asked if that was how he did it. Kayden, seeing him gather his energy on his own after having taught him just once, was puzzled. Back in the room, the boy and the cat are meditating to master the technique that Kayden had taught in the basement. Jiwoo, being very disciplined, managed to stay focused during the meditation. The meditation would help him better concentrate his energy. Completely focused on using the technique that Kayden taught, he was already able to move his energy. The cat observed that even though the concentrated energy was minimal, he was managing it. Even with Kayden having transferred energy to him, the results were impressive. Thinking he wasn't getting results, Jiwoo interrupted his meditation. He was unsure if he was doing it right as the cat had taught, but the cat warned that things would be difficult. Honestly, the cat found it strange that the technique had given Jiwoo the abilities on a silver platter. Still, the boy was saddened because he thought he would be able to feel the energy moving through his body as he had in the basement, which made him think he lacked talent. The sound of the alarm on his cell phone interrupted their conversation. Realizing he was late, he rushed up the stairs. Then he dashed down the same stairs like a madman, searching for the cat's food. Once he found the food package, he began to serve the bowls for Kayden and the striped cat. The bowl for the bicolor cat was full and there were some kibbles scattered around it. The same was true for the striped cat's bowl. In a hurry, he said goodbye to Kayden and mentioned he would leave food for the 3 alley cats in the backyard. With the boy already gone, the cat remained in the room, staring at the door. Sitting on the carpet in the room, the cat sighed deeply. He grumbled while looking at his bowl, noting that the boy never remembered his own food. He recalled when Jiwoo claimed not to have talent. Kayden knew that the amount of energy was too small for the boy to perceive, but he was certain he was already able to concentrate it in his heart. It was the first time he had seen someone make such immediate progress besides himself. Licking his paw while thinking about these facts, he realized that his method was indeed effective. He noticed that he had never taught or even shown the technique to anyone. He realized it was he who had done that with Jiwoo and even made a way for him to feel his own energy throughout his body. And he wasn't surprised to find out that the boy wasn't a genius. With a proud demeanor, he celebrated because he knew he was the great Kayden, the extraordinary one. His joy was short-lived as the 3 alley cats suddenly appeared, running by him at full speed. Kayden, very annoyed to see that they had already finished their own food, called them idiots. The 3 were heading straight for Kayden's food bowl, and Kayden warned them not to even think about it. The large bicolor cat had a very serious expression, glaring at the 3 alley cats. When he realized they understood perfectly what he was saying. Even so, one of them started circling Kayden's bowl again, taking advantage of the moment when Kayden was staring at the striped cat lying on the sofa. He was remembering the awakened one who was doing experiments to achieve a forced awakening. He barely managed to finish his thought as the cats began meowing, and one even dared to rub against Kayden. The alley cats gathered around Kayden to pet him while one of them kept watch over the food bowl. Unable to withstand the pressure, the bicolor cat gave up the food so that the alley cats would leave him alone. Now we are in a school building, specifically in Jiwoo's classroom. Yawning, Jiwoo was relieved not to have arrived late. He was very sleepy and looked tired due to having slept very little in those days. In fact, many things had been happening since Kayden entered his life. Jiwoo preferred the activity of being with Kayden over being alone. The teacher had to intervene, asking him to wake up immediately. The teacher was concerned because lately, all Jiwoo did in class was sleep. The boy woke up, dazed, looking around trying to understand, as he had spaced out in his thoughts for just a bit. He was very startled to realize that the class had already ended, and the teacher informed him that he had been sleeping since the beginning. The teacher didn't even know what to do with him, as the boy was usually a model student. The teacher changed the subject and asked if anyone had seen the student Win, as he had been absent that day and wasn't answering his phone. Jiwoo only realized when the teacher mentioned Win that he had been absent, and saw that he still hadn't made any friends. Quietly, he observed Win's empty desk beside him. The school building was very large, and it was getting late as the students were heading home. Most of them left with their friends, some alone, but all were heading home. Jiwoo was very excited because he knew for sure that Kayden was waiting for him again, but he was also worried if the other little kitten had woken up. He was walking when something caught his attention. Stopping to look, he noticed some boys bothering Win. They seemed to be looking for something in his backpack. They rummaged through it, and threw all its contents on the ground. One of them commented that the backpack was full of cat food and jokingly said it should be for him to eat. Even with his backpack overturned and hearing the boys' taunts, Win remained calm. Jiwoo, from a distance, asked what Win was doing there. He was watching the boys in the alley and realized his classmate was being harassed. The boys in the alley didn't like Jiwoo's presence, and told him not to get involved. Somewhat flustered, Jiwoo said he couldn't avoid getting involved since that was his classmate, and pointed to Win. This made the 3 boys who were looking for trouble face him challengingly. One of them approached and asked what a weakling like him could do. The boy tried to strike Jiwoo but couldn't, due to Jiwoo's exceptional speed. Unable to land even a single blow, the boy would get frustrated. Agitated, the boy asked Jiwoo if he was actually dodging. Not convinced that he couldn't land a hit, the boy continued trying, and another boy went to help him. The leader of the group watched the 2 trying to hit Jiwoo and realized they couldn't. Despite their lack of success, the 2 kept trying to hit Jiwoo. Very intelligent, our protagonist noticed people passing by and commenting on the fight. He showed it to the other boys. Seeing this, their leader told them to stop embarrassing themselves. Passing close to Jiwoo, the leader made it clear that he knew he was the boy who he warned Jiwoo to keep his eyes open. The leader of the gang warned that if he saw Jiwoo again, things would go badly for him. After being threatened, Jiwoo stood there watching the boys leave with a look of not fully understanding. Win got up after putting his belongings back in his backpack, and silently listened to Jiwoo asking if he was okay. He heard but didn't answer, just passed by Jiwoo without saying anything. Jiwoo saw him pass by but didn't understand why Win was like that. Stood there for a few seconds thinking about it. Not understanding, he started to follow Win, asking him several questions like why he hadn't gone to school and why there was a lot of cat food in his backpack. Reaching a certain point in their paths where they would take different directions, Jiwoo told him his way was the other direction. Win continued walking without paying attention to him. Still, Jiwoo said goodbye, waiting a bit to see the reaction of what he considered to be his new friend. Not getting any reaction from Win, he turned around and went as fast as possible to his house. At that pace, he arrived quickly at home. Opening the door happily, he loudly announced to Kayden that he had arrived. Jiwoo greeted the 3 alley cats. He petted each one and asked if they had seen Kayden. He thought his friend might be upstairs, so he went up the stairs to check. He opened the door cheerfully, calling for Kayden and asking where he might be. Seeing the attic empty, he realized Kayden wasn't there. Even not seeing him, he continued searching everywhere to find him. He was very sad when Jiwoo went down the stairs to search a bit more. He looked around the living room and the sides to see if he could find Kayden. Not finding him, he stopped and sadly thought that he might have left. Downcast and thoughtful, he was very sad to imagine that Kayden might be leaving. The alley cats were around the boy, meowing and seeing his sadness. Jiwoo was completely disheartened and couldn't imagine his friend could do that to him. Still standing, he even clenched his fist in anger or some other feeling. In a fit of madness, the boy began to shout how Kayden could leave without telling him. The cat was listening to the boy scream, even after asking Kayden to stay until he got better. Even if there was an emergency, he could have at least informed before leaving. Kayden, despite being in a feline body, was still human and had his needs. He didn't respond to the boy as he was in the bathroom. Jiwoo, after realizing that Kayden hadn't left, was in the room with him apologizing and said he had lost his mind for a moment. He thought the cat had disappeared and felt very sorry for the confusion, promising that it wouldn't happen again. He kept asking the cat for forgiveness, but the cat didn't respond. Eventually, after much insistence from the boy, the cat replied that it was okay and he could stop now. Happy and relieved, Jiwoo asked if the cat had forgiven him. Kayden replied that it wasn't that serious, and it was ridiculous that they were still talking about it. The boy scratched his head, looking at the cat as if he felt guilty. The situation worsened when the boy asked if Kayden had finished what he started in the bathroom. Not believing the boy's audacity, the cat, Sarah, raised one of its paws. With the other paw, it grabbed the boy by the shoulder, ready to punch him since he was already sitting down. Terrified, Jiwoo begged the cat to lower its paw. Looking at his cat with affection, he said he was very happy that it was just a misunderstanding. The cat was still in a punching position but seemed to be having doubts, so it just sighed or let go and turned its back to him. Jiwoo watched the cat from behind and looked very happy. A noise caught their attention. It was the cat rustling on the sofa. Both looked immediately at the sofa where the striped cat was and realized it was starting to regain consciousness. The cat lifted its head and managed to open its eyes, though it was clear it was dazed. Excited, the boy told Kayden that the cat had woken up. The 3 of them stared at each other, but Kayden was not happy at all. The striped cat took a while to realize it had woken up, but once it did, it stood up on the sofa, and its tail was raised in an attack position. The striped cat looked at them and growled. The 2 looked back at the cat silently without moving. However, the striped cat remembered Kayden bringing his paw down on its face. It was so scared that it decided to pretend to forget. Looking at Kayden, the striped cat began to groom itself. That was all it was doing at the moment, trying not to attract Kayden's attention. The tabby cat decided to take a full bath on the sofa, and the boy and Kayden just watched. Kayden asked Jiwoo if he knew why the striped cat was acting like that. Before Kayden could finish speaking, the boy had his hand on the striped cat. He grabbed it by the middle and lifted it off the sofa. He sat with it on the carpet of the room and seemed very happy. Looking at the cat, Jiwoo told it that he was very happy, and the cat seemed to be paying attention to him. It did not react when the boy started petting it. Jiwoo asked Kayden if it was okay to take the striped cat to the vet. Trying to convince Kayden, he showed the kitten and said that now it was calm and he thought it would stay that way until the end of the appointment. Kayden came closer and told the boy that the cat was not calm and was extremely scared, and he stared at the striped cat sitting on the boy's lap. Jiwoo knew that Kayden had already taken a look at the cat, but he also wanted the opinion of a veterinarian and told Kayden that if he went along, everything would be fine. Kayden knew the boy was right in thinking that if he went along, everything would be fine. However, after realizing this, Kayden was furious because he realized that Jiwoo was trying to manipulate him into coming along. He glared at the boy with a scowl without saying what he was thinking. After that, the boy, who did not want and would not go to a boring place, tried to bribe him by offering treats in exchange. Not receiving any response from the cat, the boy thought better of it. He spoke while looking at some empty cans, noting that they were out of food and it would be good to buy some. Kayden, looking at the empty cans, realized it was true and that argument was valid. Now they were already on the street, and that large bicolor cat was impressing several people who thought it was cute. Jiwoo was happy because he was going to the vet with his cats, and girls were passing by and interacting with Kayden. Our protagonist noticed that Kayden looked dispirited and told him that the night air was very refreshing, perfect for stretching their legs. Jiwoo continued loudly talking to Kayden about how it was a nice evening for a collective outing. Kayden knew that people would soon think Jiwoo was a lunatic. Passing by was Woon, who was in the area. From afar, Woon noticed that the boy was with the striped cat as a result of the experiment. He realized this while watching the boy and the two cats pass by. Woon remembered his master's words, the man conducting the experiments. Woon continued to observe the boy talking to the two cats. The veterinarian greeted the boy and asked what he was doing there so late. Jiwoo explained that he wanted the vet to check the kitten in his arms, as he thought the cat was injured but wasn't sure. The vet began examining the cat while Kayden listened, observing the pet shop. Kayden spotted the canned food and tried to find a way to get closer, as the vet said that the reactions of the striped cat were normal, and there didn't seem to be any broken bones. Kayden was on a stool admiring the canned food. Turning and looking at Kayden, the vet said he was more concerned about the bicolor cat because it really needed a diet. Kayden, upset by the vet's comments, got off the stool near the boy. Jiwoo looked to the side and seemed impressed. He asked the vet why there were so many animals hospitalized there, and the vet replied that all were very injured and someone kept leaving them in front of the clinic. Jiwoo was disappointed to learn that someone was abandoning injured animals there. The vet continued, saying that before Jiwoo arrived, he had been doing emergency treatment on 2 animals that had arrived. Jiwoo wanted to know if they were suffering abuse. The vet said he wasn't sure. None of them showed physical injuries, but there was another problem. The vet did not have the proper equipment to conduct tests, but they were showing signs of substance dependence. Jiwoo and Kayden were outraged to hear that. Returning to the hideout where the Awakener conducted his experiments, Woon descended the steps of a staircase. When opening a door, his master asked if he was slacking off again, and stared at him, expecting an answer. Woon said he had gone to dispose of the animals' bodies. The master warned him to be careful when outside, as trackers could show up at any moment. The Awakener was upset because he couldn't understand why it wasn't working. He was sure he was administering the same amount of substance. Woon, interrupting his master, asked him a question. The master said he could ask. Woon asked what kind of ability the tracker his master had faced had. The Awakener replied that from what he could see, it had something to do with movement. The tracker appeared in front and disappeared with the experiment in a fraction of a second. The Awakener also said that if he had prepared for it, he would never have lost the experiment. He said all this with great anger and clenched lips. With much hatred, Woon's master said that if he found that tracker, he would eliminate its kind. Woon had an idea of who it might be but said nothing, only continued listening in silence. We are at Haydam High School where Jiwoo and Woon attend. In the classroom, young Jiwoo arrives on time and heads to his seat. Looking to the side, he notices that Woon still hasn't arrived, but soon he sees Woon entering through the door and waves to greet him. Even though he sees his classmate waving, Woon doesn't respond. Woon observes how fast Jiwoo's arm moves and recalls what the master said about the tracker's ability being related to movement. Then he stared at him even more. Woon, settling into his seat, hears Jiwoo greeting him. Jiwoo had a big smile on his face, expecting some reaction from his classmate next to him. Noticing that Woon wasn't going to greet him back, Jiwoo's smile faded. Now he was just staring at Woon, quite embarrassed for not being greeted in return. The other boys in the class asked when they had become friends since Woon had recently transferred, and Jiwoo hadn't made any real friends. His classmates found it very strange that the two of them were friends. Through the window, one could see how beautiful the sky was outside. The teachers continued explaining their lessons and handing out materials. However, Jiwoo was very entertained by his phone. He was scrolling through his phone to look at pictures of his cats. He had taken a picture of the 3 alley cats. There was also a picture of Kayden sleeping in a funny position. Looking at the screen of his phone, he was laughing to himself while being observed by Woon. As much as Woon watched the boy laughing to himself at his phone, he couldn't even begin to understand what was going on in Jiwoo's mind. Woon thought that if Jiwoo were a tracker, it would mean he was a professional who had received training. But looking at him, It was hard to believe he was a professional. Meanwhile, at Jiwoo's house, Kayden appeared weak and staggering. He didn't know what was wrong. His body had felt tired since the morning. He suspected there might be something wrong with the cat's body, perhaps a side effect of the wounds Kayden had suffered. Looking at the other alley cats, he noticed that all three were lying down. What had happened to him was also affecting the other cats. He thought it might be the ability of an awakened one. He suspected he had been tracked down there. Kayden watched the three cats, and they were all purring, snoring, and rolling around. He realized that even though they were snoring, they all seemed fine. Looking at the sunlight, Kayden realized it was the cat's nap time, which meant that because of that body, he too would feel sleepy at this time of day. It felt as if all the energy in his body was being drained bit by bit. Kayden, staggering, felt like he was about to fall asleep. He thought that if he avoided the sunlight and went to the other side of the room, he could avoid it. Very sleepy, weak, and staggering, he tried to move to the other side of the room. However, the sleepiness he was feeling was stronger than his will to escape. Lying down on the floor, he couldn't believe that the great Kayden would lose to sleep. He stretched out his paw, his claws slightly trembling. Moments later, he fell asleep. Now all four cats were lying down in the room, with Kayden joining the three alley cats for a nap. After class, Jiwoo was happily heading home when he found a cat and approached it. Rummaging through his backpack, he told the cat that he thought he had something for him. Showing a treat to the cat, he asked if it was hungry. The cat, which was on a wall, began sniffing the treat offered by the boy. Jiwoo told the stray cat that it didn't need to be afraid and could eat. From a distance, Won watched the boy feed and talk to the cat. Calling Jiwoo by name, Won approached him. Jiwoo hadn't seen his classmate coming. Won directly asked where he had gotten the cat. Jiwoo was surprised, as his classmate always avoided conversation. He answered that the cat wasn't his. He had just fed it because it looked hungry. Won, watching the cat licking the treat, said it wasn't that cat he was referring to. Won explained that he was talking about the striped cat Jiwoo had been carrying last night. Jiwoo said that it was last night when he took the cat to the vet, so that's when Won had seen him. He explained that he had met that cat a while ago, but one day it disappeared, and after a long time, it suddenly reappeared all beaten up. Won calmly listened to Jiwoo. Jiwoo continued, saying that's why he had taken the cat to the vet. Won said he thought it might be his cat. Jiwoo was surprised that the cat had an owner. He asked his classmate if he had lost his kitten. Very excited, Jiwoo asked Won if he wanted him to fetch the cat for him. Eagerly, the boy ran off to get the cat so Won could be sure if it was his kitten. He ran off shouting for Won to wait a moment while he fetched it. Jiwoo's strange behavior made Won believe that he wasn't a tracker. If he were, he would never show him the cat so easily. Very sleepy, Kayden noticed that Jiwoo had come home, but he was too sleepy to notice Jiwoo's movements. Kayden even asked what Jiwoo was doing. Jiwoo replied that he had found the owner of the striped kitten. Kayden asked what he was talking about, and Jiwoo replied that he'd be back in a moment. It seemed that all the sleepiness had dulled Kayden's senses. Won was still waiting for the boy to return with the striped cat. Jiwoo came running back with the striped cat inside his jacket. He showed the cat and asked if it was the one Won had lost. Won looked at the cat and saw the mark in its eyes. There was no doubt it was the experiment. Won confirmed that it was indeed his cat. But the cat, staring at Won, remembered him and the master experimenting on him in the lab. The cat began to squirm, fluffing up its fur and growling at Won. Jiwoo asked the cat to calm down, and Won asked Jiwoo to hand him the cat. Even though Jiwoo was very naive, he realized something was wrong between Won and the cat. Won, with a serious expression, told Jiwoo to give him the cat. Jiwoo observed the cat's reaction and Won's. He asked Won if the cat really belonged to him. Won coldly replied that it was indeed his cat. Confronting him, Jiwoo asked why the cat was acting like that if it was really his owner. The cat wouldn't be so skittish. Won's expression became even more serious, making it clear that he would take the cat. Jiwoo told him he wasn't the cat's owner because he wanted to take it, even though it wasn't his. The boy replied that he should just give him the cat. Looking into Jiwoo's eyes, he declared that Jiwoo would be in danger if he kept the cat. Our protagonist hugged the cat tightly against his chest and refused to hand it over. With a very serious look, the boy said Jiwoo had left him no choice. Knowing Jiwoo's abilities, he quickly unleashed his power, catching the boy and the cat off guard. Jiwoo took the full blow without being able to react. Won warned him that he wouldn't be able to stand up for several hours. Jiwoo was unconscious on the ground, and the cat beside him growled at the boy. Without any mercy, Win directed his power toward the cat, lifting the feline into the air. No matter how much it struggled, Win was many times stronger than that cat. Taking the full force of the power, the cat fainted in midair. Win grabbed the cat by the scruff of the neck, holding it by its fur. Standing with the unconscious cat in his hands, he stopped to observe the boy unconscious on the ground. As he turned to leave, he heard Jiwoo's voice asking him to wait. Looking back, Win noticed that the boy had gotten up and was staggering. Win couldn't believe that he was standing, as he had hit all of his vital points. Jiwoo, still staggering, called out to his classmate. He asked why Win was doing this. Jiwoo wanted to know why he had been attacked, and why his classmate was taking a kitten that wasn't his. Win took a deep breath to speak to Jiwoo. He said he didn't know why the cat was with him, but he wanted the cat and that Jiwoo should forget everything that had happened, including the cat, showing it fainted and held by one hand. Jiwoo didn't understand what Win was trying to say and asked him to explain so he could try to understand. Even though our protagonist was so innocent, he managed to piece the facts together and understood that Win was involved with the awakened one. Knowing this, Jiwoo confronted him, asking if he was on that man's side. Win froze, realizing that it was indeed him who had stolen the cat from the master. Jiwoo wanted to know what master he was talking about. He knew that Jiwoo's awakened ability was related to acceleration. He attacked him as fast as he could. He knew he needed to strike before Jiwoo could move. Jiwoo was thrown far away after taking the direct attack. After the hit, he was trying to stand up to fight back. Without wasting time, Win fired another attack, but this time our protagonist was much faster than him. Win couldn't land the hit and watched Jiwoo's speed. It was no wonder he had managed to steal the cat last time, as Jiwoo was very fast. Jiwoo now knew that his classmate was also an awakened one and was connected to that other guy, and he wanted to know why he wanted that kitten so badly. Jiwoo kept getting attacked but dodged all the attacks. He was getting closer and closer to Win, determined to get the cat back. He was very close to grabbing the striped cat again, but Win noticed his intention and moved the cat faster than Jiwoo. Even seeing this, Win couldn't believe the boy had closed the distance between them so quickly, but he knew that no matter how fast a person was, if their movements were predictable, they were at a disadvantage. So, when he saw Jiwoo was going to try to grab the cat again, he attacked. Jiwoo, hit by that blast of power, flew far away. He felt his body aching. The boy holding the striped cat in his hand was standing still, watching Jiwoo. He was wondering what was wrong with that boy. If he was the same tracker that had been after them, then he should have received combat training. But all of his movements up until now had been sloppy. Jiwoo could only look at the cat in Win's hands. The cat was helpless, held in one hand, unconscious. Looking at the cat, Jiwoo knew he had to do something. He got up from the ground with difficulty and rushed at full speed. Even so, he was no match for the boy holding the cat. Win grabbed Jiwoo by the clothes, pinning him against the wall. After pushing him against the wall, he continued to press him using one arm. Win was determined to find out who Jiwoo was and which group he belonged to. But Jiwoo had no idea what Win was talking about. Win recalled all the times Jiwoo seemed to be following him, showing up at various moments out of nowhere. He insisted, asking if Jiwoo wasn't hunting them. Our protagonist replied that he had no idea what Win was talking about and why he would hunt him. Win seemed convinced and let go of his clothes. He wasn't sure if Jiwoo was truly innocent, but it made no sense for someone at Jiwoo's level to be sent to face them. Looking at Jiwoo, he warned him to forget everything, and forget about him and the cat. Turning his back as Jiwoo fell to the ground, he told him to forget about his master too. Jiwoo collapsed on the ground and struggling to breathe. He thought he was an idiot and didn't know what to do. He was sad and in tears, now thinking it would have been better to leave the kitten at his house. On the ground, Jiwoo recalled all the time he spent with the striped cat. At that moment, he became very upset, struggling to get up. It seemed hard for him to stand as he was very exhausted after taking so many attacks from Win. Now we return to Jiwoo's house, where our two-colored cat yawns. Kayden, swinging his tail, was thinking he had slept the whole day. He also noticed Jiwoo hadn't returned yet. He was sleepy at the time but remembered Jiwoo had said something. He recalled the boy mentioning he had found the cat's owner, and that he would be back in no time. Lying on his stomach and swinging his tail, Kayden thought that this story about the cat's owner sounded very suspicious, and it had been a long time since Jiwoo had left. Slowly getting up, He sighed and went to the window, knowing that Jiwoo could be quite confusing at times. Going to Wooden's hideout, located in a quiet and deserted street. Wooden's master widened his eyes, barely believing it when he saw his experiment, vibrating with joy and raising his arms in excitement. He praised Wooden and said he had no idea he was so useful, although Wooden was always great once he set his mind to something. The awakened one took the experiment, opened a cage, and said that now he could finally continue his research. He said that all the other experiments had died before showing any results. Smiling, the awakened one said that now he wouldn't have to worry about any experiment other than this one, and he asked Win how he managed to locate him. Win replied that it was by accident that he found the person who was with him, and managed to take it back. The awakened one looked at Win and asked if he had found him by accident, and what had happened to the guy, asking if he had gotten rid of the person. The boy replied that the person had escaped. The awakened one said it would have been much better if he had killed him, since it would be hard to capture him again due to all that speed. Looking angrily, he told Wooden to make sure to kill him next time. He also said that he was pleased with Wooden because he was able to bring the specimen back and that Wooden had done very well. The awakened one didn't want to waste time and started his experiments at that very moment. He was very satisfied because all their problems were now solved. As Wooden passed by the cage that held the cat, he didn't seem to feel well. He stopped in front of the animal's cell and watched it for a while. Even though he was weak, very weak, Jiwoo managed to follow the boy with the cat. He passed through an alley and was sure he had seen Wooden enter that building. He was thinking about whether he could rescue the pet since he had used a bit more of his ability to catch up with Wooden. He was glancing around, trying to recover some strength when he heard someone's voice. When he looked up, he saw that man, the awakened one, sitting on the stairs with his cat. Our story shifts to Kayden searching for Jiwoo. That large, bicolor cat was looking through the pet shop window, searching for Jiwoo. Realizing the boy wasn't there, the cat jumped down from the shelves. Kayden knew he wasn't a child. Sooner or later he would return. A feeling made him stop and think. He stood still for a while, not moving forward or in any other direction. Not knowing Jiwoo's location made him uneasy, especially since they should be hiding by now. While searching for him, Kayden was complaining because Jiwoo could be such a headache at times. Back at the awakened one's hideout, our protagonist finds himself in a tough situation. Jiwoo recognized that the man knew he was the awakened one who had been beating the kitten, but he didn't know what to do. The awakened one asked Jiwoo what he was doing there, pointing to the direction of his hideout as if he was heading that way. Trying to remain unnoticed, Jiwoo said he was just passing by. The awakened one wanted to know why the boy was lying to him, despite Jiwoo denying it. The awakened one had seen him looking suspiciously at the alley since he arrived, and he knew that boy seemed familiar. He quickly realized this was the person who had stolen his specimen. He said Jiwoo was the damn one who had taken the cat. Then, he released a powerful force. Realizing he had been found out, Jiwoo ran as fast as he could to escape the awakened one's attack. But this time, it was no use. The awakened one attacked. The attack hit Jiwoo full force, making him fall to the ground, overwhelmed by pain. Calmly descending the stairs, the awakened one asked where Jiwoo thought he was going. The awakened one approached Jiwoo. Wooden was passing by the laptop showing the images from the outside camera. He noticed that his master was out there, fighting someone. So, he went to take a closer look at who he was fighting, and he realized it was Jiwoo. He was lying on the ground, injured. He seemed to be in a lot of pain, and the awakened one was approaching him step by step. Getting closer, he noticed the tracker was just a kid. Jiwoo quickly got up from the ground to try to defend himself. Using his speed, he tried to disappear from the awakened one's sight, but he wasn't fast enough to do so. While trying to get out of there, he realized something was wrong with his legs. Wasting no time, the awakened one delivered another blow, this time hitting Jiwoo from behind. This time, the attack was stronger and struck Jiwoo's legs. Satisfied with the result, the awakened one was smiling when Wooden quickly came out of the hideout, calling for his master. Wooden looked at the ground and saw the state Jiwoo was in. He was lying in pain right in front of Wooden's master. Turning to Wooden, the awakened one said it seemed there was a leech on him, but he didn't care because at least it allowed them to capture him. Wooden quietly observed his master speaking and acting that way. The awakened one kicked Jiwoo with his foot, telling him to get up. The awakened one was angry because after just one blow, the tracker was on the ground, too weak. Even though the blow had been extremely strong and hit directly, he still expected more. He thought Jiwoo was pretending to create an opening and escape, but that was unacceptable. Woon told his master that Jiwoo was probably weak from the fight with him, as he wasn't able to use his ability properly. The master turned to listen, and Woon said he could take care of the rest, and there was no need for his master to waste his energy. The master said he thought Woon was right. At that moment, Woon breathed a sigh of relief, but his master stopped and said that actually, on second thought, whenever he remembered that boy's face, it made him angry. So the Awakened One decided to deal with Jiwoo himself. The Awakened One struck a blow over Woon's shoulder, hitting Jiwoo. The blow hit one of Jiwoo's legs. The master then said that breaking one of his legs would make it impossible for him to use his ability properly. Jiwoo writhed in pain, and the Awakened One found it funny how much fuss he was making over a broken leg. Kicking his leg, the Awakened One shouted, asking who Jiwoo thought he was trying to deceive and which group he belonged to. Woon just watched as his master tried to get the truth out of Jiwoo. Even after being hit multiple times, Jiwoo said nothing, which made the Awakened One even angrier. Jiwoo was on the ground, writhing in pain, but still said nothing. Woon shouted at his master, trying to get his attention. The master, annoyed, asked what Woon wanted, to which Woon quickly replied that he should stop because the person wasn't the tracker who was after them. The Awakened One became furious and asked Woon how he was not a tracker. Woon explained that he could have taken the cat, but he wasn't a tracker. The Awakened One asked what he was talking about since he had said he took the cat with the tracker, and now was saying otherwise. Woon tried to explain to his master that the boy was an Awakened One but was not the one after him. Apparently, he had taken the cat after seeing it being abused. The Awakened One, looking at the boy on the ground, understood what was happening. Now that he had seen up close, the clothes the boy was wearing seemed familiar. He was from the same school as Woon, and Woon confirmed to his master that they were in the same class. Very angry, the Awakened One said that if what Woon was saying was true, it meant he had lied to him. The young man apologized to his master, saying that he thought there would be no problem since he had already recovered the cat. The Awakened One no longer wanted Woon's apologies. Enraged, he directed his power at Woon for being daring and lying to him. That action caught Woon off guard. The attack threw him away, slamming him against the wall. After hitting the wall, he fell to the ground. He warned that he would punish Woon later. The priority was to get rid of the brat. Looking at Jiwoo on the ground, the Awakened One said it was just a coincidence. And that's what Woon thought. Woon knew his master wouldn't let him off easily. The master, looking at Woon, said it happened that he was in the same class as an Awakened One at the school he was transferred to, and that Jiwoo had somehow stolen the species. He wanted to know the chances of it being a coincidence but didn't care anymore if he was a tracker or not. Gathering all his energy, he was preparing an attack as there could be no witnesses to their crime. Before attacking the boy on the ground, the Awakened One was stopped. He looked back furiously and realized what Woon had done. The Awakened One asked if he had really attacked. Woon replied that he did, but he missed on purpose. He apologized to his master and said he couldn't let him kill Jiwoo. This made his master lose control completely. He couldn't even control his energy, letting it flow in the air. Kayden, who was searching for Jiwoo, felt that energy from afar. He was trying to recognize that energy. Returning to the battle, the Awakened One asked his disciple if he had lost his mind, but he responded to his master that he was very sorry. He asked his disciple if he thought he could still stop him, having put force into that shot. Woon told his master that it was for the greater good. Managing to make him angrier, he launched a burst of power. The Awakened One launched a burst of power which Woon dodged. He told Woon that he would have saved him when he was used as an experiment, given him food, and taught him to use his powers, and yet he still used them to attract him. Shooting power in various directions, the master said he would get rid of the disciple before that brat. Woon tried to dodge the bursts of power aimed at him. Realizing that he needed to retaliate, he launched an attack that hit his master directly. After attacking him and realizing he had hit, he felt regret. He told his master that he didn't intend to hit him at all. At that moment, the Awakened One didn't want to hear anything else as he was very disappointed with his disciple. He released a large amount of energy, launching attacks at Woon. Woon was dodging and trying to defend himself as best he could. The Awakened One began to falter, as he had been struck. Woon noticed the severity of his injuries and asked his master if he was okay. The master, wiping his mouth, looked at his disciple and said he was better than he expected, elevating his energy to the extreme. The master looked at his disciple and said that since they had reached that point, now he would see how strong he had become. The master was at full power. Wun, from his master's look, knew that he was serious from now on, and things would get bad. The master started launching waves of power that hit his disciple, sending the young man crashing into a wall. Wun felt the attack intensely and couldn't react. He was soon hit by another burst of power, this time throwing him to a considerable height. The attack was strong, and he felt the pressure a lot. After being thrown through the air, he was now falling, and the awakened one, his master, was walking towards him when he landed on the ground. The master then asked his disciple if that was all he had, because he had rebelled against his master with the perfect skill. Wun affirmed to his master that he would never, but the master was too angry to hear anything coming from his mouth. The awakened one began kicking his fallen disciple, asking what he was talking about as he had just betrayed him because of that brat. All that commotion attracted Kayden's attention. Watching the man kick the boy on the ground, he observed to see who it was. Upon realizing it wasn't Jiwoo, he felt relieved. He had been worried for a moment thinking it could be Jiwoo. He made sure to search for him. Getting a little closer, he managed to spot him on the ground. He looked to make sure it was Jiwoo, but it was himself lying with a fractured leg, scratched face, an injured hand. Seeing him fall to the ground, the cat approached. Close to Jiwoo, the cat checked how he was, and began to poke the boy on the ground. Calling out to him, he asked how he was. The cat was extremely sad because he had already warned him not to cause more trouble. He asked the boy what had happened. Jiwoo recognized Kayden's voice. He lifted his head slightly, and opened his eyes to make sure it was him. The cat claimed to be itself and explained that, since it hadn't returned home, it went out to search for it, knowing that the boy could be a problem sometimes. Even though Jiwoo was injured and lying on the ground, he apologized to the cat for disturbing it. Kayden was very upset to see him in such a condition. A little further ahead was the awakened one, who, after kicking Wun several times, warned him that he would have to explain a lot later, but first he would deal with the boy. Wun insisted on telling his master that Jiwoo was not a tracker. The master said it didn't matter whether he was a tracker or not. He knew about the job and could not leave him as a witness. He added that, to make things worse, he was an awakened one, and he turned to go to Jiwoo. He saw from a distance that there was now a cat near the boy. Ironically, he asked who the little whale was, as it could be useful since they were without a test subject. Jiwoo choked with fear and dread, fearing what that man might do to his cat. He told Kayden to run away quickly. The cat told him it was better to think of himself first, and to look at his own state. Jiwoo said he was serious and that Kayden should leave. Placing his paw on the boy, Kayden told him not to worry and to stay there for a while. He began to transfer his energy to heal Jiwoo a little. The cat, releasing its energy, said it would take care of everything, and with its paw on the boy's forehead, it began to glow. The cat seemed to be in its energy form, frightening the awakened one who was observing the boy and the cat. The energy surrounding the boy was so intense that it was hard to see clearly. Everything was engulfed in a large flash of light and a surge of energy. The cat's energy could be felt from far away, and that flash was blinding to Jiwoo, Wun, and the awakened one present. The awakened one even tried to see something, but nothing could be seen in that glare. After the flash, a young man appeared, adjusting his hair with his hands. The young man asked the awakened one if he was an idiot for not creating a separate dimension to play around in. Jiwoo was speechless seeing that figure, and the master and his disciple were also scared. The young man raised his hand and snapped his fingers, creating another dimension for them that covered everything the energy touched. The awakened one's eyes widened, realizing he had the ability to create dimensions. The young man drew the awakened one's attention, asking if he wasn't being too harsh on the boys. The awakened one soon wondered about the relationship between that young man and the boy on the ground, but decided to ask who he was. With a smug smile, the young man replied that he was wondering who he thought he was. The awakened one knew that such a high-level and electrically charged ability could only belong to one person. Looking at the young man, he wondered what he was doing there. Jiwoo asked if he was Kayden. At that moment, the awakened one became desperate. Jiwoo kept asking if it was really Kayden. At this moment, the awakened one shivered and said, "Kayden, the destroyer." With an ironic look and a sarcastic smile, Kayden responded, "Bingo." The awakened one knew that if he was indeed the real Kayden, he wouldn't stand a chance in a fight. So he explained that he didn't want to fight him, and had no idea he knew the boy. He continued, swearing that he didn't know the boy was important to him. If he had known, he would never have attacked. Kayden, preparing to attack, told the awakened one to shut up since he wouldn't stop complaining. With a look of disdain, he told the awakened one to just die. The awakened one realized Kayden was not joking. Kayden unleashed his lightning power on the awakened one. The awakened one took the full brunt of the power and was being electrocuted in the air. The intensity of the power was so great that it frightened Jiwoo and Woon. The awakened one was in the midst of the energy core launched by Kayden. After receiving the attack, the awakened one fell to his knees on the ground. He truly looked as if he had been struck by a thunderbolt. Seeing the state of his master, Woon called out to him. Kayden further mocked, asking if the awakened one was still alive and saying he thought he had gone too easy. Raising his hand and concentrating energy, he said that, if that was the case, he would make sure to complete the job properly this time. But before he could launch his power, he noticed some movement. The disciple stood in front of his master, and Kayden asked what he thought he was doing. Woon knew that Kayden the Destroyer was one of the most powerful awakened ones. Jiwoo not only knew him but also lived with him. Kayden ordered Woon to stop staring at him and answer the question. Woon hadn't realized he had been staring at him for a long time and thinking. He apologized. He pleaded for his master's life. Kayden asked if the person who had been beating him moments ago, and whom he wanted to save, was his master. Woon answered yes and said they had no idea Kayden had a connection to Jiwoo. Kayden said it was clear they wouldn't know, but it was a pity because he knew that insect very well and what he had done. Woon listened attentively to him. Kayden stared at them a little longer. With a very serious expression, he warned Woon that if he didn't leave, he would die along with his master. Woon stayed in the same place. His master asked him to leave. The young man turned and looked at his master, who asked once more for his disciple to leave. Woon continued to look at his master, not believing what he was asking. Kayden warned that if they wanted a joint death, he would fulfill their wish. Kayden was still staring at the two when he heard Jiwoo calling his name. Jiwoo told him he thought it was time to stop. Looking back, Kayden asked if he thought it was enough already. He said they had made Jiwoo end up in that state, and he wasn't even angry. He continued, saying that if he hadn't arrived, they would have indeed killed him. Still looking at Jiwoo, he warned him that the world was no longer a bed of roses for him. Jiwoo was looking at Kayden and paying attention to what he was saying, but he knew he had made a mistake. It also meant that Kayden wouldn't have to kill them. Kayden kept looking at the boy on the ground. He asked Jiwoo if he knew why he was in that state. Jiwoo replied it was because of him, and he said he didn't want Kayden to have to kill anyone for him. Kayden, looking at Jiwoo who was still speaking, said that Woon was his friend who was trying to save him. Kayden was analyzing the situation. He looked at Woon, who was still standing in front of his master. He then turned back to Jiwoo, glaring at him in anger, knowing that Jiwoo had solid arguments. Running his hand through his hair, Kayden took a deep breath and let his enemies go. Woon, in shock, watched, then Kayden shouted for them to get out of his sight. With hatred in his eyes, Kayden warned them that if he met them again, he would kill them and that a day like this would not happen twice. Woon helped his master up and was supporting him as they walked away, thanking Kayden for letting them go. Kayden knelt down to speak to Jiwoo and told him he hoped he was satisfied. The boy was thrilled to hear him, but Kayden was annoyed by Jiwoo's innocence. The boy told Kayden that they needed to find the striped kitten. Back at the protagonist's house, Jiwoo was lying on the couch with his leg bandaged, while Kayden, still in his human form, was using his powers to heal him. After finishing using his energy to heal Jiwoo, Kayden said he knew Jiwoo's leg was broken, but it would heal quickly thanks to his powers. Kayden was sitting on the couch next to Jiwoo, who seemed very cheerful. Jiwoo turned to his side and kept looking at Kayden in his human form, feeling so satisfied that he smiled. Kayden noticed Jiwoo staring at him and asked if the boy had hit his head too, because he kept staring and laughing. Jiwoo responded that he had imagined him differently. Kayden asked if Jiwoo really thought he was a fat cat. Jiwoo said he thought Kayden was cooler than he had expected. Kayden had already told him before that he was amazing. Jiwoo agreed and now saw it was true. The more Jiwoo looked, the more incredible Kayden seemed. The three alley cats had been acting strange since Jiwoo and Kayden arrived. Jiwoo thought they were scared because now Kayden was a person. Something started to bother Kayden. Jiwoo asked him several times what was wrong. Kayden's energy was leaking from his body. He was transforming into a beam of light, just like the last time he changed from a cat into a human. The flash was so bright it blinded Jiwoo. When he opened his eyes again, his friend Kayden had turned back into a two-colored cat. Even Kayden was shocked, just like Jiwoo and the three alley cats. Looking at his paws, Kayden was trembling and sweating. The two-colored cat was terrified, but the three alley cats seemed pleased that their friend had returned. At the Awakened One's hideout, Wen placed his master on a couch. The young man was very worried about his master. The Awakened One was very weak after the fight. Wen apologized to his master, saying it was all his fault. The master told him to forget about it, saying that if he had killed the boy, Kayden wouldn't have spared his life. Even hearing these words, Wen still felt guilty. Wen wanted to treat his master's wounds, but the Awakened One preferred to leave as quickly as possible and asked the young man to gather the data. The trackers, who had been chasing the Awakened One and his disciple, were leaping from rooftop to rooftop, following their energy. They seemed to have already found the Awakened One's hideout, and were closing in on the perimeter. Even the trackers left energy traces in the air. The Awakened One sensed this presence. He felt something approaching quickly and realized there wasn't enough time for them to escape. He stood up quickly from the couch and started gathering energy to attack his disciple. He said he was doing it because of the betrayal he had suffered. After gathering a bit of energy, he launched an attack at Wen, who fell to the ground. The Awakened One began to tell his disciple that he always knew Wen would betray him, which was why he never taught him anything. Wen didn't understand what his master was talking about. Soon after, they found Professor Lane, Wen's master. The Awakened One, full of rage, asked the people there who they were. They were from the association, and they were there to arrest him for committing crimes and conducting illegal research. The master, furious, turned to his disciple and said it was his fault. He began to gather energy again to attack him. But at that moment, he was quickly stopped by that group of trackers. Even though he was very weak, it was difficult to restrain Professor Lane. Despite being held down, he struggled on the ground and screamed at his disciple that he would kill him with his own hands. Wen sat sadly in a corner, listening to his master say that because of him, he wouldn't be able to finish the research. As he was being taken away by the trackers, the professor continued shouting at his disciple, blaming him. One of the trackers stayed behind and told Wen he would have to come with them too. Wen, with his head hung low, followed the trackers. Let's go to the top of a commercial building where a woman is receiving information from a young man. Looking at a tablet, she says it's difficult to confirm for sure since the evidence has been erased. But judging by the images and the damage on the ground, she realizes it could be the result of Kayden's ability. She analyzed the information on the tablet. She commented to the young man beside her that the association still ignored that fact and asked him to make sure the information didn't get leaked. Otherwise, they'd have a lot of problems. The young man replied he would handle it and asked how to deal with the boy. At that moment, the woman was looking at a picture of Jiwoo on the tablet, which was lying on the table. It was an image of Jiwoo from the day Kayden was protecting him. Now back at Jiwoo's house, the three alley cats were swaying back and forth. They were paying attention to a toy. Jiwoo was having fun playing with the three alley cats using a rod with a plush at the end. But he noticed that Kayden was unusually quiet. Kayden had been standing still for a long time, staring through the living room window. He was deep in thought because his body had reverted to that state. He knew he had overused his powers a bit, but this was far too strange. Kayden knew he wasn't supposed to be able to transform without leftover energy, and yet it happened suddenly, involuntarily. His eyes widened as an idea came to him about what was happening to him. The change he went through wasn't just physical, but a complete transformation from human to feline, meaning he truly was a cat. A smile began to form on his feline face. Running his paw through his fur, he couldn't even believe how amazing it was. His abilities were perfect. But soon he thought of something else that made him even more thoughtful. How, then, had he transformed back into a human? This idea made the large bicolor cat ponder for a long time, until, very happy and satisfied, he showed his feline face as Kayden the superior. Even the striped cat, who was dazed on the sofa, lifted its head a bit to see what was happening with Kayden. The bicolor cat was overflowing with happiness, thinking that it didn't matter much, as he was sure everything would turn out fine. Something like this was simple now that he had regained his strength. The tabby cat on the sofa, still recovering, looked at the bicolor cat with confusion. After seeing what was going on, it returned to its resting position. Jiwoo asked Kayden why he had turned back into a cat, and the very impressive cat replied that this body was very useful. Kayden was explaining that the boy hadn't realized yet how incredible his body was, but he couldn't finish his sentence because he was hypnotized by the toy. That toy hanging from a string tied to a rod was catching the attention of the 3 alley cats just as it did with Kayden. The large bicolor cat adjusted himself, preparing to leap and pounce on that toy. He was very excited, playing with the plush at the end of the rod. He rolled on the floor, purred, jumped, and thought he couldn't lose. With the momentum of his body, he attacked the plush at the end of the rod as if it were an enemy. But coming to his senses, he realized he was playing with a plush toy. Irritated and embarrassed, he pulled the plush at the end of the rod with his claws. After that, he went to a corner and curled up. He was calling himself an idiot in his thoughts because he had to perfectly transform into a cat. Jiwoo was scratching his face, thinking about what had just happened. Now Kayden was sad in a corner, and the alley cats were no longer playing. Jiwoo was worried about the striped cat on the sofa, as it still hadn't gotten up. The boy wondered if the cat was hurt. Kayden quickly turned to see what the boy was doing. He told Jiwoo that there were no wounds when he examined him. The cat should get up soon. In fact, he was in better shape than when he first arrived. Upon petting the cat, Jiwoo noticed it was trembling and thought it might be cold. He kept petting the striped cat on the sofa. Jiwoo sat on the same sofa as the striped cat and began petting it to warm it up. Jiwoo was very affectionate with his cats and looked at all of them with great tenderness. Kayden was apprehensive about the energy marks he left behind during the fight. Even though he had fully recovered after the scene, it still worried him. He informed the boy that he would step out for a moment and would be back soon. He sensed that someone awakened nearby had been alerted by their little show. Jiwoo said he wanted to go with him, but Kayden explained that he couldn't think about walking around after everything he went through yesterday. The boy said that having someone as strong as him by his side, there was nothing to worry about. Hearing those words from the boy, Kayden froze for a moment. Then, he became emotional because the boy had finally realized how amazing he was. Jiwoo continued, saying it was impossible to ignore the fact that Kayden was indeed strong after seeing it with his own eyes. Kayden realized the boy knew how to judge people well. Jiwoo added that the guy got scared and gave up immediately after finding out who Kayden was. And the boy also said he wanted to be like the cat. Continuing, the boy asked if the cat could please teach him to be strong as well. Kayden was exuding happiness, but something interrupted the big feline's joy. Jiwoo, noticing something had bothered Kayden, asked what was going on, but looking to the side, he noticed his phone was ringing. Jiwoo answered the phone, and someone wanted to talk to him. The person on the other end said their name was In-hyuk, and they were calling to give him some advice. Kayden was paying attention to the conversation the boy was having. Jiwoo was startled because the person on the other end of the line said the advice was about awakened abilities. He was even more startled when the person said they were standing outside. The boy looked outside through his glass door and saw a man holding a cell phone. He observed that the man was wearing a suit and had a good appearance. Still on the phone, the man told the boy he hoped he believed him when he said he wasn't there to fight. Moments later, that man stepped inside the house of our protagonist, and he looked at the 3 alley cats staring at him. That man, sitting on Jiwoo's sofa, seemed intimidated by the cats. Looking at the sofa, he also saw another striped cat, and looking straight ahead, he was being fiercely stared at by Kayden. In-hyuk commented to Jiwoo that he had many cats. A bit shy, the boy agreed. In-hyuk apologized, saying that the cats had caught him by surprise. Looking at Jiwoo, he said he would get straight to the point. "We would like to be your sponsors so you can live as an awakened being," the boy replied, asking what this was about. In-hyuk continued, saying that they had recently learned of his situation and that they had conducted research on him. He apologized for doing so without Jiwoo's consent, but asked for his understanding, as they were in a difficult situation at the moment. Their job was to take care of all special ability users. Kayden listened as In-hyuk mentioned that their job was to take care of the awakened behind the scenes. Kayden had never stopped to think about who was responsible for managing it all. Jiwoo asked if the man was also awakened. In-hyuk smiled and replied that he was also an awakened. He decided to demonstrate his ability by creating a small whirlwind with his energy. With his hands, he made a small vortex using his energy. Kayden realized he could manipulate the wind, which meant that the person in charge was Jiwoo. At that moment, he was referring to the woman investigating both him and Jiwoo. Kayden knew that the person at the top of the wind ability users ranking should be Jiwoo. He knew she lived somewhere in South Korea, but he never imagined it could be here. In-hyuk mentioned that he was a wind ability user and that he could manipulate the air however he wanted, depending on the situation. He continued his demonstration with small gusts of wind, impressing Jiwoo greatly. The boy quickly said that he was only fast, surprising the wind user. Even Kayden was surprised by his attitude. Despite knowing how innocent Jiwoo was, the wind user found it amusing and started laughing. Jiwoo felt very embarrassed while Kayden became furious, swearing that the kid would have no future if he kept revealing information like that. The man, looking at Jiwoo, said that this was proof that he was new to all of this since most ability users don't tell strangers about their powers. Jiwoo found it odd because the man was the one who demonstrated his ability first, but the man explained that his ability was already public knowledge, and the technique he showed was something simple. He went on to say that in Jiwoo's case, it was different since he would have an advantage over others who didn't know about his ability. He gave an example that if an enemy could quickly adapt to Jiwoo's powers, they would become ineffective. That's when Jiwoo understood why he couldn't do anything in the fight against Win, and why his master broke his leg before he could make a move. In-hyuk, calming him down, said this was common among users who were ignorant of their situation. Regarding the awakened, he mentioned there would be times when Jiwoo would need to reveal his abilities. Jiwoo thanked him for the advice he was receiving. The man said they were done for the day and that he would hire him again. He mentioned that today's visit was just to meet him and chat a little. Jiwoo still had a question. He asked the man who visited him why he was helping. Smiling, Miyuk said that teaching new users of special abilities the basics about this world was the responsibility of the territory leaders, and it was a general rule among the awakened groups. He also said that it was because the world would fall into chaos if their existence was revealed, and they didn't want that kind of situation to happen in their area. The boy understood and thanked him for the explanation. As he stood up to leave, the man said that he might have sponsors, but in reality, they only offered basic help, so Jiwoo didn't need to be worried. He said it was time to go and turned to leave, only to come face to face with Kayden's scowl. Kayden was making his best expression to scare off the visitor. After the man left, Jiwoo sat on the couch with the striped cat and Kayden, while the three alley cats were eating. Jiwoo asked Kayden what they were going to do from now on. The cat responded that Jiwoo would need to live with an awakened now. Kayden admitted that he truly didn't want Jiwoo to be part of this, but since he had attracted their attention, it was too late to run away. The cat told the boy that this was the result of his selfish actions. Still, he was relieved to know that the territory belonged to Jiwoo. Kayden knew that Jiwoo was one of the few Koreans in the ranking of the most powerful and had an excellent reputation. Seeing that the man was a wind ability user, they could interpret that he was part of her group. The cat explained this to help the boy understand the situation better. Afterward, the cat looked down and called Jiwoo by his name. Looking at Jiwoo, he asked him not to cause any more trouble. Now, Jiwoo would officially be part of the awakened world, so he needed to grow stronger and learn to defend himself from that moment on. The boy happily accepted and said he would. The cat thought that Jiwoo always accepted things so impulsively, but probably had no idea what he was getting into. Back at the office of the woman investigating Jiwoo and Kayden, the man who visited Jiwoo was reporting that, as they suspected, Jiwoo didn't seem to have been involved in the incident. Jiwoo asked if he had met Professor Dellen's assistant by accident. The man replied yes, that he was at the school long before Win was transferred. This made the woman thoughtful. She asked about the association, and In-hyuk replied that they still didn't know about Jiwoo's existence, and that he thought it would be best if they didn't find out about him. The way they handled the situation with the professor invading their territory had been quite unpleasant. The woman listened attentively to the man. He continued, saying that Jiwoo was the kind of person you feel the need to protect. He added that Jiwoo was a good kid, someone who would never do anything wrong. Back at our protagonist's home, we find Kayden focused on his exercise. At least, he tried to stay focused. But the noise from the three alley cats eating from the bowl was distracting him, and Jiwoo announcing he was going to school didn't help either. Kayden saw no need for the boy to announce everything he was going to do. Kayden remained silent, watching the ruckus caused by the three alley cats. But his patience wore thin quickly when he started yelling at the cats to take it easy on the food and asked if they wanted to stay with him. At the school, Jiwoo was walking with crutches to get around more easily. Even with his broken leg, he was still thinking about how Win was doing. He wondered if Win had been hurt badly when he fought his own master because of him, and if he had received treatment. 3 boys noticed Jiwoo's presence. They asked each other if that was the kid from that time. One of them answered yes, that it was him. Looking at him, they commented that he had hurt his leg. They also asked each other which class Jiwoo was in. Reaching his classroom, Jiwoo entered through the door. He looked at the desk where Win used to sit and realized he wasn't there. For a moment, he remembered Win holding his master back. Struggling, Jiwoo tried to settle into his seat for class when he heard someone say they didn't think they'd ever meet him again. It was the 3 troublemakers following him. They were all upset when they realized Jiwoo didn't even remember them. As the troublemakers got closer, Jiwoo asked who they were. They didn't like it and thought he was mocking them. From the way they were talking, Jiwoo remembered what this was about. One of them, trying to look tough, attempted to intimidate Jiwoo, asking where his other friend was. The rest of the class, watching the bullies pick on the boy with the broken leg, just looked and whispered. One of the 3 got irritated and told everyone to stop staring. At that moment, Jiwoo felt sad and stayed quiet. One of the boys tried to tease him, saying that he looked cute with his broken leg and that it seemed like he couldn't run away like last time. After saying this, he kicked Jiwoo's broken leg, causing Jiwoo to feel immense pain. Looking at the boy, one of them asked if it hurt and if he was going to cry for his mom. He warned Jiwoo that they had only just begun with him. Those boys kept bothering Jiwoo and kicked him to the ground. Then they laughed at him, saying how far he had fallen. Jiwoo was thinking about what to do. Normally he would just avoid them, but his leg was broken and he couldn't run away. From the ground, he looked up at them, who were staring at him. The other classmates were standing around the boys, just watching what they were doing to Jiwoo. Those judgmental looks reminded him of when he was a child. People also judged him for being different. He was always alone and didn't make friends because of his ability. He was thinking about this when one of those boys grabbed him by the shirt. The boy held Jiwoo tightly and, raising his arm with a clenched fist, said he was going to massage his face. Seeing the boy's fist close to his face, Jiwoo instinctively dodged, avoiding the punch to the face. The boy, who was ready to hit him, didn't understand why he couldn't land the blow. This made him even more furious and eager to fight. Cursing Jiwoo, he kicked his leg for dodging. Now Jiwoo was on the ground, feeling intense pain in his leg. The boy started kicking his face with his feet. As he did, the boy said he thought Jiwoo still hadn't understood and that they weren't playing around. The 3 of them teamed up to beat the boy lying on the ground, saying he was lucky they'd been bored lately. They also said it seemed like they were going to have a bit of fun going to school at that time. One of them said it was annoying that their friend wasn't there, and that he wanted to see that other guy with glasses Jiwoo had mentioned was in the same class. One boy said to the other that the guy was indeed from the same class but hadn't arrived yet, and he was pretty sure they were in the same class. One of them said he'd like to meet that boy while they were there but figured they'd have to leave it for next time. Jiwoo was lying on the ground and remembered when Win faced his master to save him. And limping, he stood up, and at that moment, the boys asked if he wanted more. One of them raised his fist and said that since he had gotten up, he was going to get beaten up again. But that boy regretted it because Jiwoo started fighting back. He was the first one to be hit by Jiwoo. As he fought those bullies, Jiwoo thought about how Win had protected him, and he wasn't going to let them do anything to him. He knew he could do it even without his abilities because he was fast, even without them. He stood up to defend himself against the 3 bullies, facing them alone. Even though they tried to fight back, the boys didn't stand a chance. Jiwoo was too fast. He no longer cared about the judgmental stares and went after the boys with everything he had, until a very angry teacher arrived, asking what was going on and who allowed them to fight in the classroom. Talking to the troublemakers, the teacher asked if it was them again and who they were picking on this time. Upon seeing it was Jiwoo, the teacher got even angrier. But suddenly, he realized he had never seen Jiwoo fight before. He asked Jiwoo how he managed to fight with his leg in such a condition. That teacher cared about Jiwoo and didn't want to see him fighting those bullies. The teacher yelled for someone to take him to the infirmary, but no one wanted to respond or help him get there. The rest of the class looked at each other, waiting to see who would have the courage to take him. Sensing no one wanted to help, Jiwoo told the teacher that he could go by himself. The teacher asked if he wouldn't like someone to go with him. Seeing that no one would help him, Jiwoo told the teacher that it was fine. While talking to the teacher, Jiwoo noticed Kayden watching from the window. He looked shocked, trying to understand why his cat was there. And worse, the cat was clapping in his direction. After seeing Jiwoo fight back against the bullies, Kayden was at the window, clapping, feeling very proud. Jiwoo noticed and felt happy. Taking advantage of the situation, he asked the teacher if he could leave early since he thought he needed to see a doctor because his leg was hurting a lot. The teacher agreed and seemed about to call someone, but Jiwoo said he could go alone, and the teacher agreed. The teacher was looking at the boys lying on the ground after Jiwoo's fight. He ordered someone to wake those boys up and take them to the infirmary. Jiwoo asked Kayden what he was doing at school. Walking home together, the cat replied that he was just patrolling the area, and since Jiwoo had been through so much lately, he was worried. Kayden said he saw that Jiwoo caused trouble again. Jiwoo apologized to the cat for causing more confusion. The cat just looked at him. Kayden said that after living with him for a few days, he understood how Jiwoo survived, probably by avoiding people who tried to start fights. He continued, saying that not only that, but Jiwoo probably avoided getting close to people and making friends because he feared they'd discover his secret. But above all, Kayden knew that Jiwoo feared his own strength. Jiwoo listened silently to everything the cat said. The cat told him not to worry about that anymore. His ability wasn't strange or weird. In fact, it was something many people would love to have. He told Jiwoo not to be afraid of it anymore, and not to run away, as they could take on anyone who thought they could defeat him. Jiwoo listened attentively to what Kayden was saying. After hearing everything, he felt very happy to know he could count on Kayden. The cat responded with a slight smile and a satisfied look. Jiwoo invited the cat to go buy some treats, offering his favorite ones. He told Kayden that Win hadn't gone to school that day. He explained to the cat that Win was the friend who helped him that day, and the cat remembered that he was the fool who begged not to kill his master. Jiwoo confirmed and said he was really worried about what had happened to him. The cat asked if Jiwoo had forgotten that they tried to kill him. One of the troublemakers who had picked a fight with Win in the alley was standing there. Looking at the messages on his phone, it read, "I know you go to the same school as Jiwoo, and I want you to take care of him." There was also a photo. It was the same one on the woman's tablet who was investigating him. Upon seeing the photo, the bully remembered who it was. This guy had had a conversation with Inhyuk, who asked if he knew Jiwoo, assuming they were close since they were often seen together. The guy said it wasn't quite like that he had only run into him a few times, and asked what his ability was. Inhyuk replied that he knew the guy couldn't answer that question, and told him to stop trying to get something that couldn't be obtained. Inhyuk said that from what they could find out about Jiwoo, he was an awakened being only recently, so he was probably going through a very difficult time right now. Looking at the photo of Jiwoo, the guy was thinking he was an awakened. Jizyuk was the name of the guy looking at Jiwoo's picture on his phone. He was being called by the 3 other boys who were bothering Jiwoo. Jizyuk asked what was going on and what was on their faces. Looking at them, he asked which school this happened at. Seeing his 3 friends remain silent, Jizyuk repeated the question, asking which school they were at. They were too afraid to say anything because they had already been warned not to mess with that person. With no other choice, they told him that the conflict had happened at the school where the 4 of them studied. Jizyuk couldn't believe that someone would mess with them at the school he attended. They then explained that it was that boy from a few days ago who did this to them, the one who feeds the stray cats. Jizyuk wasn't pleased at all to realize they had messed with a boy. He had told them not to bother the boy and just ignore him. But when they saw him in front of them, they couldn't help themselves. They explained that at first, the boy didn't pay any attention, and they kept pestering him. But after that, everything happened so fast they couldn't understand a thing. Jizyuk thought it was obvious they would get beaten up by Jiwoo, considering he was an awakened. With this information, Jizyuk now knew what Jiwoo's ability was. Jizyuk smiled, satisfied, as this was the information he had been seeking. At Jiwoo's house, in the basement, Kayden was savoring a food sachet. He told Jiwoo that he was a headache, and Kayden was really worried about him. Jiwoo wanted to know what Kayden was talking about. Still eating his sachet, the cat asked in what sense Jiwoo wanted to know. The cat replied that it was in every sense, and it was obvious because Jiwoo acted without thinking. When he was fighting those guys, except for his speed, everything else was a mess. Jiwoo had relied on his awakened state, and just threw random punches. The only valuable thing Kayden saw was him reacting against those amoebas. Kayden said that if Jiwoo were to fight another awakened in his current state, he could already imagine what would happen. Jiwoo stayed silent, head down, just listening and agreeing. Hearing Kayden point out his many mistakes, Jiwoo seemed to remember something. He thought that if he were more skilled, Win wouldn't have been hurt as badly as he was. Kayden noticed that the boy was lost in thought. He understood that Jiwoo was now taking things more seriously. Kayden warned that he would teach him something very useful. But first, Kayden wanted to eat a few more sachets. Up until now, Kayden had only taught him how to control energy. Starting now, Jiwoo would learn some abilities. Jiwoo was very happy because he knew the cat was an excellent teacher. Kayden wanted to see more enthusiasm from Jiwoo regarding his new training. The boy, excited, shouted that he was ready to start the training. Jiwoo began punching a sandbag that was there, and Kayden slowly showed him the correct posture so he could do the training properly. Kayden believed it was important to strengthen the body as well as focus on abilities, rather than just being content with the body's natural growth. Kayden knew it was essential to improve his physical combat techniques, which would also help him use his abilities more efficiently. Kayden asked Jiwoo for more concentration because they weren't just hitting a sandbag, they were training to become stronger. The cat encouraged him, saying that his opponent would take advantage of his situation and defeat him on the spot. Kayden said they had just started, but he was going to teach him something interesting. He asked Jiwoo to release his energy, directing it to his arm and then to his fist, using that energy to increase the speed and strength of his punch. He warned Jiwoo that if he managed to sync the moment his punch made contact with the opponent with the moment his energy reached his fist, it would create a powerful effect. Kayden told him it wouldn't happen on the first try, but that was the secret. Jiwoo looked ahead, imagining the opponent, and focused on gathering energy in his fist. Kayden saw that it was working and said that this could be a small victory for Jiwoo. Jiwoo prepared as the cat had instructed, and when he felt the energy was ready, he struck with all his might. Kayden didn't say anything because he was too amazed by the boy's performance. Very excited, Jiwoo asked the cat if he had seen that. He was thrilled. Jiwoo said he had tried to do exactly as Kayden had taught him and felt that his punch was going faster, followed by an explosive sensation at the end. Jiwoo was saying it was amazing, but the cat still couldn't express anything, being utterly impressed. Kayden's cheeks turned red because he knew he was an excellent teacher, a genius when it came to explaining things. Jiwoo boosted his ego even more, saying Kayden was incredible, making the cat almost lose it. They spent a good part of the night in the basement training to improve their skills. The next day at school, Jiwoo was very sleepy because he had trained so much. He had been so focused on the training that he stayed up all night without being able to rest. Looking at Win's desk, he realized his friend hadn't shown up at school that day. Jiwoo felt sad seeing the empty desk. He wanted to talk to him. Jiwoo felt his eyes closing. He thought he would just take a short nap. The teacher entered the classroom and the first thing he saw was Jiwoo sleeping at his desk again, always so tired. The teacher couldn't imagine the shock a good boy like Jiwoo must have gone through to get into a fight with those boys the day before. Just remembering those boys trying to hit Jiwoo made the teacher angry. He decided to let Jiwoo sleep a little longer, feeling that Jiwoo was going through difficult times. Meanwhile, Kayden was at Dallas's old hideout. He was checking one more time to see if he had left anything behind. Kayden thought they had fled from there, not knowing exactly what had happened to the teacher and his disciple. Or perhaps someone else had gone after them after they left. Kayden heard voices and ran to see who they were. The people were looking for a witness but hadn't found one because the area was deserted. Kayden concluded that those people had cleaned up the place and wondered if they were from Ji-Yeon Lee's group or some other group. He, too, was looking for answers. The men were talking among themselves, trying to figure out if they had discovered anything, but it seemed the teacher and the disciple had refused to cooperate. Those men encountered a large bicolored cat. Kayden bristled as if he really were a cat. The men looked and confirmed it was just a big feline. Kayden had no choice, but he knew exactly what to do. The men were staring at Kayden in his feline form. Then Kayden raised his paw and began licking it, acting like a normal cat. The men started walking away, not paying attention to the cat, wondering how it had gotten there. The big Kayden had allowed those losers to live for a bit longer. As he left, one of the men commented that he had never seen such a fat cat in his life. Jiwoo entered the school along with the other students. He looked down, seeming to be deep in thought. He was thinking about how his leg was almost healed. He knew Kayden had fixed it after their training sessions, but it was feeling so good that it didn't hurt anymore. He was lost in these thoughts about his leg when he heard someone call his name. Looking to the side, he saw Jiwoo and the other boys. Jiwoo recognized the guys with Jiwoo and thought they were after him again. Jiwoo told Jiwoo that they should go talk somewhere else. There was no point in causing a scene in front of the school. Jiwoo's friends were pleased because they were sure Jiwoo was going to get in trouble, and they really wanted to see it. However, Jiwoo didn't let his friends come along. They wanted to join the conversation, but Jiwoo refused. Jiwoo had no idea what Jiwoo wanted from him, but he followed him anyway. They crossed to the other side of the school, where it was quieter. Jiwoo said it was better to talk there since it was a secluded spot. Jiwoo asked if they were going to have to fight. Jiwoo replied yes. After what Jiwoo had done to his friends, he couldn't just let it go. Jiwoo explained that it was Jiwoo's friends who started it, and even threatened to go after Win. Jiwoo said he believed Jiwoo, and that's why he understood Jiwoo's retaliation. Jiwoo felt relieved, thinking he wouldn't have to fight him. However, Jiwoo told him that he also needed to consider things from his perspective. This left Jiwoo speechless, as he didn't understand what Jiwoo meant by that. Jiwoo told Jiwoo not to be so upset. After all, the only difference between them was their opinions and perspectives. Jiwoo didn't want to fight because he was a peaceful person, but if he had to, he would fight just to end the situation quickly. In his mind, he thought he could win the fight, given his abilities. Jiwoo told Jiwoo to stop just standing there and to attack, saying he'd let Jiwoo make the first move, so he should give it his best shot. Jiwoo thought he could end it while Jiwoo was being careless. With his super speed, he charged at Jiwoo. His intention was to land a cross punch to Jiwoo's face, but his opponent already knew about his powers and abilities and simply dodged the attack. Jiwoo thought he had missed the punch, believing he was fast enough to hit Jiwoo, but that wasn't the case. Jiwoo had merely evaded it. Thinking he had made a mistake with the first strike, Jiwoo quickly prepared for a second attack. However, this time, his opponent didn't seem interested in dodging. As Jiwoo launched his second cross punch, he realized Jiwoo had simply caught his fist with his hands. Jiwoo didn't seem to be a match for Jiwoo, who was a trained awakened. Jiwoo told Jiwoo he seemed to have misunderstood. Then Jiwoo delivered a precise blow to Jiwoo's stomach. Jiwoo quickly felt the force of the punch, leaving him crouched on the ground, caught off guard. Jiwoo told him he should have gone all out from the start. He made it clear that this wasn't going to be like the time Jiwoo beat up his friends. Jiwoo asked if Jiwoo was still confused, then clarified further by asking Jiwoo to hit him with his awakened abilities. Things suddenly became clearer to Jiwoo. He quickly jumped back, distancing himself from his opponent. Jiwoo told him not to be so surprised, as he already knew about Jiwoo's awakened powers through Hyuk. Jiwoo knew who he was talking about since they had spoken days earlier. Jiwoo revealed that he was also an awakened, just like Jiwoo, and that he belonged to the same group as Hyuk. So he wasn't worried and went all in. Jiwoo said Mr. Inhyuk had promised to help, so why was Jiwoo now eager to fight him? With a smile on his face, Jiwoo explained that this was to determine which rank Jiwoo belonged to. He said he already knew that Jiwoo had only recently discovered the awakened world, and now they needed to test him to determine his rank. Jiwoo told him not to worry, as he would go easy on him. Jiwoo imagined that Jiwoo's ability might be wind, just like Mr. Inhyuk's. Jiwoo asked if Jiwoo was just going to stand there, and then launched an attack at him. It was a blast of wind, just as Jiwoo had expected. But before being hit, Jiwoo not only dodged but also ran away from the spot. Jiwoo thought Jiwoo's abilities were impressive, noting that they seemed to involve speed. But at that moment, he increased the intensity of his attack to see if he could catch Jiwoo. Jiwoo managed to dodge again, though this time only just barely. Jiwoo was pleased, confident in Jiwoo's abilities. He kept increasing the power and duration of his attacks. Jiwoo decided to try using the move Kayden had taught him. Using his speed, he positioned himself behind his opponent and prepared to strike. But as soon as he attacked, Jiwoo realized it was a clone. It was too late though, as the real Jiwoo was behind him and hit him. Jiwoo, showing no mercy, struck Jiwoo with a precise punch. Jiwoo had been hit from the side. Jiwoo was very skilled. The punch was powerful, sending Jiwoo flying with significant force. Jiwoo told him that he wasn't the only one who knew how to be fast, as he could see Jiwoo controlled the wind. Jiwoo explained that he could create speed by accelerating with the wind and jumped into the air. Jiwoo, realizing he was about to be attacked again, prepared to dodge. But he couldn't evade the strike this time either. This time, he took a cross punch to the face. Realizing he was about to lose, Jiwoo tried to use better footwork to dodge. But as he was about to evade, he stepped wrong and felt his injured leg. Unable to escape, Jiwoo simply closed his eyes and waited to take another hit. But he only felt the wind on his face. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Jiwoo had stopped with his fist right in front of his face. Jiwoo asked what was wrong with Jiwoo's leg and if it was injured. Jiwoo thought it was strange that Jiwoo didn't finish the punch and was even concerned about his leg. Jiwoo said it would be shameful to beat someone with an injured leg. Disappointed, he told Jiwoo he would head home, clearly expecting more from the fight. Jiwoo suggested they try again when Jiwoo's leg was healed so that the fight would be fair. Jiwoo narrowly escaped the situation, but he stayed in that empty spot, feeling pathetic once again. In-hyuk was staring at him to see if he could figure out anything about the fight. Jiwoo was silent. In-hyuk had already warned him to stop doing that. He wondered what Jiwoo had been thinking when he started that fight. He asked if Jiwoo really thought he wouldn't be found out, and that's why he decided to go ahead. In-hyuk said that kid was different from him. He grew up without knowing about awakened people, believing his ability was a curse. Jiwoo didn't think that was a bad thing. In-hyuk said he was really surprised when he investigated Jiwoo's past and found out that he and his family moved every year to avoid being discovered. He asked if Jiwoo really had to show his powers to a kid like that. He talked so much that Jiwoo was left speechless. In-hyuk wanted to know what would happen if the president found out. Considering she had already warned him she wouldn't let it slide next time. Jiwoo said it wasn't like she was going to find out. Plus he thought her sensitivity was exaggerated. At her age, she didn't even have a boyfriend and worked all day long. What kind of life was that? Jiwoo, seeing that In-hyuk was talking non-stop, remained quiet. He started to get worried because In-hyuk was looking straight ahead as if someone was behind him. Jiwoo began to sweat because he had talked too much. The president, standing behind him, said it had been a while since they last saw each other. He looked back as if he were seeing a ghost. She seriously asked him to follow her. In-hyuk, his friend, wished him good luck. At Jiwoo's house, things were calm. He was trying to get the striped cat to eat something, but the cat didn't seem to be in the mood. Seeing the boy was sad, Kayden asked what was going on. Jiwoo was so upset he wanted to talk. The striped cat didn't want to eat the snack Jiwoo offered either. Kayden wanted to know if Jiwoo was feeling down because he had gotten beaten up by someone. The boy remained silent but listened to what was being said to him. Kayden asked if he said the guy was analyzing him for a ranking, and it was obvious that the guy was a troublemaker trying to pick a fight with Jiwoo. Kayden said it would have been strange if Jiwoo had won. The cat asked the boy if he expected to become an expert after training for just 2 days. He pointed out that compared to an ordinary person, Jiwoo was exceptional, but to an awakened one, he was just a rookie. Jiwoo was so disappointed with himself. Kayden told him he should be grateful for coming out of the fight alive. Jiwoo stayed quiet for a bit longer. Then he said he didn't want to lose. Kayden warned him that wanting to be strong and not wanting to lose are two very different things. Jiwoo was frustrated for not being able to do anything. Kayden didn't know if he should feel sad for the boy or just irritated, so he told Jiwoo that his abilities were similar to Mr. In-hyuk's. He could increase his speed by manipulating the wind. The cat asked if he had done that, and the boy replied that yes, and the guy was as fast as him, but better at everything. He couldn't even touch him. Kayden concluded that the guy used his powers to both attack and enhance his speed. He asked if Jiwoo was absolutely sure about that. Kayden asked because he was sure the guy's speed wasn't the same as Jiwoo's. The boy responded that since he managed to keep up, he must have been fast. Kayden was sure the guy's only accomplishment was being able to keep up with Jiwoo. The boy didn't understand, but the cat explained that the guy only managed to counter Jiwoo's ability. Jiwoo must not have tried to move at his full speed. Jiwoo widened his eyes because Kayden was right. He had acted just as the cat had said. Kayden explained that Jiwoo's opponent was using 2 abilities at once, one to attack and the other to increase his speed. Jiwoo felt a little better knowing that he was faster than Jiwoo. Kayden told him that his speed was so incredible that even he was impressed. Jiwoo was overjoyed by Kayden's words. The cat asked if he had said he would come back after healing his leg, and the boy agreed that's exactly what had happened. Kayden realized they didn't have much time. around 5 days. It was impossible to increase an awakened person's powers in such a short time. Jiwoo asked if the cat would help him. Kayden asked when he had ever refused to help. Jiwoo knew he could count on his feline friend. The boy always got emotional when Kayden was friendly with him. Kayden was already planning Jiwoo's training. He got up from the sofa and announced that the training would be brutal. They headed to the basement to train. The cat was going hard on him. The goal was to increase his efficiency, making his body memorize basic abilities. He wanted Jiwoo to move faster. The fight wouldn't end even if he ran out of energy. He ordered Jiwoo to move, using his body, not just his abilities. The next day at school, the 3 boys who had fought him went to see if they could find him in the classroom. But Jiwoo hadn't shown up that day either. At Kayden's house, the striped cat seemed worried about Jiwoo, who was sleeping on the living room floor. Jiwoo was so tired that he slept alongside the 3 alley cats. When Kayden arrived, causing a commotion, he shouted so loud that Jiwoo woke up immediately. Coming down the stairs, Kayden told Jiwoo that he didn't have time to relax and had already told him to practice accumulating energy while he slept. Jiwoo started to accumulate energy while Kayden observed him closely to check if he was doing it right. But Kayden noticed that the energy accumulation was decreasing until Jiwoo fell asleep and stopped accumulating. The bicolor cat gave the boy a slap on the face without mercy. Meanwhile, the president wanted information about Jiwoo because he was no longer attending school, and In-hyuk hadn't been able to get in touch with him either. She seemed to find the situation concerning. She looked at In-hyuk to see if he knew anything more. He explained that Jiwoo hadn't returned to school since the incident with Jiwoo. He believed it had been a big shock for Jiwoo. The president just listened to what In-hyuk was telling her. Even though In-hyuk had stopped the fight, Jiwoo was an innocent child who hadn't yet learned how our world really works. It must have been terrifying for him, so terrifying that he isolated himself from the rest of the world. She asked Mr. President if she would authorize him to go and check if everything was okay at Jiwoo's house. Jiwoo is on the rooftop, his shoulders aching a little. The president went so hard on him just because he said those things about her, that it was no wonder she couldn't find a boyfriend. His friends arrived to talk to him and told him that Jiwoo hadn't been attending classes. The classmates were talking among themselves about the fight, wondering if the boy had gone to the hospital. Jiwoo didn't seem to be enjoying their conversation. At Kayden's house, Jiwoo was very tired from training. Kayden arrived, saying he couldn't believe Jiwoo was tired after such a light session. Jiwoo said he thought he was much stronger than before, but Kayden replied that with that amount of training, it wouldn't be possible. He said it was as if he could even feel the smallest particles of awakened energy circulating through his body. The cat mentioned that it was like that because Jiwoo hadn't trained his abilities before. Kayden knew that Jiwoo would get to know his body more and more from that moment on, but there was still a long way to go because he was still very weak. Jiwoo reminded him that only the cat was strong because of its body. Kayden knew the boy was right because he had a skilled body like his own. With a mischievous smile, the cat added that the world would be doomed. Jiwoo was enjoying lying there with the 3 alley cats, but Kayden reminded him that they needed to continue training. The boy sat up and was preparing to get up, but before that, he had to do something. Curious, Kayden asked what it was, and Jiwoo replied that he needed to feed the babies. Jiwoo was struggling to move, and his hands were trembling. Even so, he was taking care of the kittens with great care. He was trying to get the striped cat to eat a little, but nothing he offered seemed to interest the cat. Kayden thought that no matter how tired Jiwoo was, he never neglected to feed the cats. If he didn't waste so much time with them, he could be stronger. The striped cat was staring at the boy, and the boy was staring back at the striped cat. Jiwoo really wanted the striped cat to eat a little because he was worried about its health. But it seemed like, even after being there for some time, it still hadn't adapted to the place. Suddenly, they heard the doorbell ring. When they checked the intercom, they realized it was Mr. In-hyuk. Kayden didn't like him at all, and to make matters worse, he was part of the same group as the boy who had attacked Jiwoo. But Jiwoo didn't know why he was there. If it were up to Kayden, the visitor would stay outside. In-hyuk said he was very sorry and had no idea that Jiwoo would go after him. Jiwoo whispered to Kayden that it seemed like he had come to apologize. In-hyuk said he was very worried, so he stopped by to see how Jiwoo was doing. He tried calling, but the phone went to voicemail. Jiwoo remembered that he had turned off his phone because of training. In-hyuk thought Jiwoo looked very tired, maybe from not sleeping well. He was glad he decided to stop by. He continued, saying he understood how Jiwoo felt because, instead of protecting him, one of his own members had confronted him. He was sure he had been betrayed, which is why he had been avoiding calls. He had learned about what happened from Jiseok himself, and said that his name was Jiseok Yoon, the younger brother of the president. Jiwoo was shocked because he didn't know that information. In-hyuk also said that the president's full name was Ji-young-yu and that she was well known in the awakened world. He also mentioned that he thought Jiseok would behave since he was closely monitored by the president, but they never imagined he would do something like that. Jiwoo didn't seem comfortable with the visit. In-hyuk also said that what Jiseok did was not authorized by the group, and he sincerely apologized. The president was especially upset and personally punished her younger brother. Jiwoo remained silent when he heard that Jiseok wouldn't pursue him anymore. In-hyuk noticed that Jiwoo wasn't comfortable in such a complicated position and wasn't sure if he could forgive what had happened. He thought that a simple apology wasn't enough to ease the pain Jiwoo had felt. Jiwoo said nothing, still silent, as if thinking about something. He then asked In-hyuk, "Does that mean I can't fight Jiseok again?" That question left the visitor disconcerted, not sure if he had heard correctly. Jiwoo explained that they would have another fight as soon as his leg healed. The man understood that Jiwoo was saying he wanted to fight again. Even so, he remained silent, calculating his response, thinking it was just adolescent pride talking. He hadn't expected that reaction, but it was better than Jiwoo being traumatized by the experience. He tried to convince Jiwoo to give up since his request was a bit complicated. Jiseok was strong, and not just because he was the president's brother. Very few people were as strong as him, and that's why Jiwoo shouldn't feel bad about losing. In-hyuk tried in every way to make Jiwoo change his mind, but Jiwoo was determined, not for that reason, but because he wanted a rematch to test himself, to see how strong he was. That response caught the man off guard. He didn't think something like that would come from Jiwoo. Even Kayden was surprised by Jiwoo's response. He observed the boy, thinking about what he had just heard from him. Kayden gave a side smile, feeling very proud of Jiwoo, as he now acted like a true awakened one. In-hyuk said he understood. He would arrange a time and place for them to have their fight. That news made Jiwoo very happy. Now he was beaming. In-hyuk asked him to let him know when he felt ready. In-hyuk looked at the boy and thought he had been mistaken, thinking that the experience would make him run away. But it seemed Jiwoo was really willing to dive into the world of the awakened. In-hyuk began staring at Kayden. Kayden wasn't liking it at all. He remained silent, staring at Kayden. Jiwoo noticed that In-hyuk was staring at the cat and thought he might be suspicious. Kayden didn't like being stared at by that vermin. In-hyuk wanted to ask Jiwoo a question. Jiwoo was paying attention. Then he talked about the cat, referring to Kayden. Jiwoo thought In-hyuk had become suspicious of Kayden. However, In-hyuk just wanted to rub the cat's belly. There was a moment of silence between them. Even the three alley cats were looking at In-hyuk. He really wanted to pet Kayden, thinking he looked like a round, soft little thing. In-hyuk was making a funny face, like someone who really wants to hold a cat. Jiwoo was predicting disaster. Kayden was furious. His fur was all bristled, and Jiwoo didn't know what might happen if In-hyuk got any closer to Kayden. The president was surprised by Jiwoo's desire to fight Jiseok again. In-hyuk reported that he explained Jiseok's strengths, and that was why. Still, Jiwoo insisted on fighting, wanting to test his skills. In-hyuk had misjudged Jiwoo because he seemed ready to live the life of an awakened one. The president seemed to be thinking about it. In-hyuk said he would take care of everything. He would carefully choose the location for the battle and would personally oversee the event. He would also pick up Jiwoo himself. The president needed to think carefully about the situation. Then she asked In-hyuk to keep an eye on Jiwoo. He thanked her and left the president's office. In-hyuk heard his name. It was Jiseok coming up the stairs, who told him that he had heard In-hyuk was going after Jiwoo. In-hyuk informed him it would be in 5 days, leaving Jiseok confused about what he was talking about. He explained that In-hyuk wanted to fight him in 5 days when his leg would be fully healed and warned Jiseok to be ready. In-hyuk went down the stairs, leaving Jiseok deep in thought. After thinking, he liked the idea. He found Jiwoo amusing because he wanted to fight again, even though In-hyuk had gone easy on him last time. At Jiwoo's house, Kayden was pushing him hard in training. Kayden insisted that no matter what, Jiwoo couldn't try to replace his skills. The focus had to be on muscles and bones. Jiwoo tried to explain that it wasn't that easy, and Kayden angrily told him that if he wanted to get strong, he had to keep going. From the couch, Kayden was watching Jiwoo's training and noticed that he wasn't putting in enough effort. Suddenly, Jiwoo felt his back being crushed. He had the audacity to say that Kayden was too heavy, and the feline told him to shut up, insisting that his weight wasn't that much. Kayden ordered Jiwoo to do what he said. That way, he would be able to lift even heavier things. The day broke, and Jiwoo was still training. Kayden was frustrated because Jiwoo's skills weren't helping his movement at all. He said everything needed to flow naturally, as a result of reflexes. Meanwhile, Jiwoo was relaxed with his friends. At school, they were passing the time, but at Jiwoo's house, things were different. As it was already night, the striped cat was sleeping. The 3 alley cats were also sleeping together, while Kayden was gathering energy as he slept. Those days had also been tough for him. He opened his eyes to check if Jiwoo was sleeping the way Kayden had taught him. He looked at the boy sleeping, filled with pride because Jiwoo had learned to accumulate energy during sleep. Kayden noticed that he hadn't heard Jiwoo complain even once, despite him pushing to the maximum. He seemed to enjoy the heavy training. Kayden thought Jiwoo wasn't quite right in the head, but suddenly he fell into a deep sleep and lost his concentration. Seeing Kayden next to him, he thought he was in trouble because he should have been strengthening his skills during sleep. However, the cat assured him he was doing just that. Jiwoo was surprised he had managed to do it. He became very agitated, and the cat said it was nothing exceptional, but he was doing well. The boy was very happy, and the cat thought it was nothing special. Still, Jiwoo thanked his cat. Kayden looked at him sideways. Jiwoo said he was having a lot of fun with everything, even though he felt his body was sore. He had never felt his power so strong. The fact that he was getting stronger made him very fulfilled. The cat listened to everything Jiwoo was saying. Jiwoo said that if it weren't for Mr. Kayden, he would have lived a life full of fear without knowing who he was. And it was all thanks to Mr. Kayden. He finally knew who he truly was. After saying that, he looked at the bicolor cat as if he owed him his life. Kayden looked back. He asked the boy to keep up the good work, and Jiwoo excitedly shouted, "Yes, sir!" He startled the striped cat and the 3 alley cats, apologizing and telling them to go back to sleep. The 2 returned to training, which was getting stronger every day. Now he could lift the cat on his back without complaining. His footwork had also improved a lot. His punches were more intense. He was eating to gain strength to continue. He could accumulate energy while sleeping. The day dawned, and it was the day of the fight. Jiwoo was feeling ready to face Jiwoo. Finally, after so much training, the day had come. Kayden warned him not to get too nervous. It wasn't a life or death fight. Besides, Inhyuk would preside over the event, so no one would get seriously hurt. Jiwoo said he knew, and just then, a car arrived. It was parked in front of Jiwoo's house. It was Inhyuk, who had come to pick him up. He looked at the cat to see if Jiwoo intended to take him with him. Kayden was staring back at Inhyuk. Jiwoo explained that he was taking him along so he wouldn't feel alone. Making a sad face, he asked if he could bring Kayden. Inhyuk said that wasn't the issue. Jiwoo defended Kayden, saying he was gentle and nice too. Inhyuk looked at the cat, who was glaring at him, and said, "Where is that cat nice?" Kayden was staring back with a very angry cat face, and Jiwoo looked like he wouldn't go without his cat. As Jiwoo arrived at the workplace, Inhyuk was impressed. Inhyuk was leading the boy and the cat. Kayden was upset because Jiwoo was in such a place that could easily be dangerous. The cat would have preferred not to come, but he couldn't leave Jiwoo alone there. Kayden was sensing a large amount of energy. There was only one person capable of holding such energy. Kayden thought it might be Jiwoo. The cat perked up when he realized the rumors about her being one of the most powerful awakened ones in Korea. Inhyuk knocked on the door to inform the president that Jiwoo was there. She asked him to come in, and Inhyuk opened the door for Jiwoo and his cat. The boy was surprised, while the cat had a serious expression. The president was sitting and looking at them. Jiwoo couldn't believe that this was Jiwoo. Inhyuk noticed that something was wrong with Jiwoo. The cat wanted to know what was wrong with Jiwoo, why he looked scared. Inhyuk asked if there was something wrong, and Jiwoo wanted to know if the woman sitting there was the president. Inhyuk confirmed it, asking if there was a problem. Jiwoo had expected her to be older. Kayden turned and looked up at Jiwoo's dumbfounded face. Inhyuk just looked at Jiwoo. The woman stood up to greet them. She approached Jiwoo and looked into his eyes. She introduced herself, saying her name was Jiwoo, president of Shinhwa. However, Jiwoo was blushing like a tomato. He said his name was Jiwoo. Jiyoung wanted to ask him a question. He paid attention to hear what she had to say. She wanted to know if he had changed his mind about fighting Jizeok, but the boy didn't want to give up. Jiyoung commented on Jizeok's strength and vast combat experience, but Inhyuk had already warned him. Jiwoo was determined to fight and wouldn't back down. She had tried to make him reconsider fighting. Jiwoo thanked Jiyoung for her concern. Although he didn't believe he could win against someone so strong, he wanted to try, even though it would be difficult since he had trained for only a few days. The president wanted to know then why he wanted to fight if it wasn't to win. He was silent for a while. Then he said that now winning or losing wasn't important. Jiyoung couldn't follow his reasoning. Jiwoo explained that he was aware of the coward he had been once, and needed to know how well he could perform on the new path he had chosen. Inhyuk was looking at him with admiration, and Jiyoung was taken by surprise. Kayden already knew that Jiwoo could win anyone over with his words. Jiwoo and his cat were taken to the training area for the awakened ones. They were once again very impressed. Looking around, Jiwoo thought the place was amazing because it was enormous, making Kayden feel embarrassed once more. Inhyuk was worried because Jizeok still hadn't arrived and wasn't answering his calls. He was upset because it was already time, and Jizeok hadn't shown up. However, his voice came from the top of the stairs. Inhyuk turned to look at him. Jizeok joked about his little delay, noticing that Inhyuk was bothered. He looked at Inhyuk, who was glaring at him. He also noticed that his sister was there. He mentioned he was late because he had been in class. Inhyuk was furious because he knew how much Jizeok enjoyed going to classes. Jizeok passed by Inhyuk, who was speaking, and went straight to Jiwoo, asking why he had talked about the class all those days. He asked if Jiwoo was doing some secret training at home. Jiwoo asked how he had found out. Kayden couldn't take the anger and embarrassment anymore with Jiwoo, and now he was talking in such a pathetic way. Even Jizeok was startled to hear his opponent reveal his strategy. Calmly, he asked if Jiwoo thought he could win with so little training. The boy and his cat remained silent. Kayden was already studying Jiwoo's opponent and noticed from the energy emanating from Jizeok's body that he was quite strong for his age. He understood why Jiwoo had lost so miserably. Jizeok wanted to start right away and told Inhyuk to begin quickly. Inhyuk took a deep breath to calm down the anger that Jizeok had caused him. He asked if everyone was ready and warned them that they would start after the third signal. At the first signal, Jiwoo got ready for the fight. At the second signal, he was calming himself. It had only been a few days of training, but Kayden had pushed him hard. At the third signal, he was thinking of doing his best. Jizeok was standing there with his hands in his pockets. That's what Jiwoo thought before being surprised by an attack close to Jizeok. He got so close to Jiwoo in a fraction of a second, fast enough to catch him off guard and land a hit. Before Jiwoo could react, he had already received another punch. This time, it was a hook to the face with no time for a reaction. With this second blow, Jiwoo was thrown far away. The cat watched everything, observing that the boy didn't have time to react. Jiwoo was on the ground, writhing. It looked like he had been knocked out. Inhyuk, Jiyoung, and Kayden watched the boy lying on the ground. Jizeok was satisfied, seeming to have finished everything right at the start. With Jiwoo down and everyone looking at him, Jizeok turned and walked towards his sister and Inhyuk. He said it was easy, he didn't even need to exert himself, and he didn't know why he had to come here. Inhyuk was watching Jiwoo on the ground. The blow he received wasn't very strong, but the impact was huge for him. Jizeok expressed regret that he and his sister had a front row seat. He talked to his sister, but she didn't respond. Inhyuk's eyes widened. Jizeok turned to see what was happening. Jiwoo was getting up, saying that the blow hurt a lot. Inhyuk felt happy to see that Jiwoo's resilience was greater than he had imagined. Jiyoung looked on without any reaction. The cat was analyzing the situation. Jiwoo had lost focus, which is why he was hit, but he had reduced the damage by channeling his powers to the impact area. Jiwoo was standing up, staggering, but regaining focus. Jizeok thought he had done more damage than he really had and was mistaken. The boy was ready to continue the fight. He had been distracted like a fool. He hadn't expected to be attacked so quickly. Jizeok felt annoyed with that kid. Jiwoo focused, and now he was the one going all out. He charged in for a rapid attack. Inhyuk was enjoying seeing his recovery. It was impressive. Jiwoo was close enough to land a hit on Jizeok, but he wasn't quick enough. As Jizeok dodged the attack, Jiwoo pressed forward with everything he had, attempting another strike. Jiwoo managed to dodge again. Jiwoo charged at Jiwoo with full force. This made Jiwoo furious because he had been taking it easy on him. Jiwoo decided to counterattack as well. Jiwoo was managing to evade Jiwoo's strikes. Jiwoo saw an opening and landed several blows using his speed. In-hyuk watched and began to analyze Jiwoo's strikes. Since his skill was speed, his movements were extraordinary. Being hit like that made Jiwoo very unhappy. He started gathering energy and told Jiwoo that all he had was speed. Jiwoo prepared an attack, and Jiwoo noticed just as he was about to strike. He positioned himself to block the attack to avoid greater damage. Jiwoo blocked and jumped back to distance himself. Jiwoo warned Jiwoo that he was as fast as him. In-hyuk saw that Jiwoo was increasing his speed, and his movements were always impressive. He had completely adjusted to Jiwoo's rhythm. The two continued to attack and counterattack. Jiwoo realized that Jiwoo was, like last time, just as fast as he was. He remembered what Kayden had said about him merely adjusting to Jiwoo's speed. Jiwoo increased his own speed, leaving Jiwoo behind, who wasn't as fast as Jiwoo. Jiwoo's sister was watching to see what her brother's next move would be. In-hyuk noticed that Jiwoo was boosting his speed. Kayden was satisfied with Jiwoo's development. The other boy was strong for his age, but it wouldn't be enough to keep up with Jiwoo. The fight was fierce, with strikes coming from both sides. Jiwoo was pushing himself to the limit, and his movements were nearing their target. Jiwoo realized Jiwoo was faster than him. Jiwoo felt very excited because Kayden was right. Kayden was analyzing each move. Initially, he thought the boy might freeze in front of a real opponent, but he was doing well. In-hyuk was amazed by the boy's movements, which were impressive. He didn't think Jiwoo was that good. He also thought it was a shame since he was fighting Jiwoo, and he wouldn't have a chance to win. The confrontation continued, with Jiwoo charging at his opponent. However, Jiwoo had already grown tired and didn't want to play anymore. Jiwoo's eyes widened because he knew that attack would be much fiercer than the others. Jiwoo, going all out, was ready to finish the battle. Jiwoo began to feel the damage his opponent could inflict on his body. Jiwoo was very angry because he had taken it easy on the boy, and he thought he could impress him. In-hyuk was worried about the direction the fight could take. He felt that Jiwoo was starting to go overboard. Jiwoo told Jiwoo that he might have improved since their last match, but he still had a long way to go to catch up to him. He unleashed blow after blow, hitting Jiwoo repeatedly. In that moment, Jiwoo focused solely on defending himself and avoiding the attacks from his opponent. Jiwoo was a highly skilled fighter and wasn't giving the boy any openings. Jiwoo was down. He felt the impact of the last few hits he had taken, but Jiwoo was concentrating even more energy to use his abilities. Jiwoo sensed the immense concentration of energy that Jiwoo was accumulating. Jiwoo was amazed that the boy was still moving. He challenged Jiwoo to try to defend against this attack. In-hyuk felt very scared, knowing the damage the boy would take if Jiwoo hit him. Jiwoo took that strong attack head-on and was being overwhelmed, taking all the hits. He was in agony with every strike he took from his opponent. In-hyuk realized this was serious. Jiwoo's movements were better than he had expected, and Jiwoo's good behavior had distracted him. In-hyuk was very angry because Jiwoo had gone too far with the boy, but Jiwoo insisted it was Jiwoo who had started everything. He also felt it was his and his sister's fault for thinking he should take it easy on someone. While he spoke, he heard Jiwoo's voice saying he was right. Jiwoo was still shaking and stumbling, trying to get back on his feet to continue the fight. He told his opponent that they hadn't finished their battle yet. Kayden knew where the attacks would have the least impact. He positioned himself exactly to absorb the least damage and managed to protect his body through the concentration of his abilities. Kayden was very satisfied with Jiwoo. He had learned the lesson well, and he did everything in a fraction of a second. The sister merely observed the two combatants. Jiwoo wanted to make sure Jiwoo could continue, but he said he could go on. In-hyuk saw how much strength Jiwoo put into his attack, yet Jiwoo seemed fine despite being hit directly. He seemed to have a secret greater than just being in shape. Did he do something to reduce the impact? In-hyuk thought that he might have actually defended himself. The fact was that now he wanted to test Jiwoo's powers. Jiwoo was worried about that kid, as this should have taken him down. He thought that maybe Jiwoo's powers included defense as well as speed. He wasn't willing to see if the kid was really better than him. He wanted to end it right then. Jiwoo was happy that the kid could take it. he was going to hit hard. Jiwoo noticed that his opponent was once again gathering enough energy to attack him. In-hyuk also noticed that he increased his energy, and wanted to see how Jiwoo would handle this. But he knew that if they continued, he could get seriously hurt. He was excited for a moment, wanting to see how far Jiwoo's powers would go. However, he decided to end the fight and said he thought it was dangerous to continue, so he would stop there. That's when Jiwoo understood that the two weren't just there to watch the fight. They wanted to protect that kid. Jiwoo shouted that if it was because of him, they could continue because he could handle it. In-hyuk didn't allow it, saying that Jiwoo hadn't even used his powers to their full potential. The kid was disappointed again because his opponent hadn't used his full potential and had already hit him like that. Kayden knew he was still about to show his true strength. The cat was evaluating whether the kid would give up or find a way to continue the fight. Jiwoo was not satisfied at all. He wanted to continue at any cost. Taking a defensive stance, he said he would continue the fight. Now his cat was proud, and In-hyuk was surprised because he thought Jiwoo wouldn't be able to stand up to them. Jiwoo said he was fine and wanted to take the fight to the end. Jiwoo found it interesting and thought he was starting to like that kid. Jiwoo told In-hyuk to let him fight because the kid was begging, and he also wanted to continue. He knew he could learn a valuable lesson from this, especially about knowing his own limits, so he began to gather an excessive amount of energy. However, In-hyuk yelled at Jiwoo not to do that and to stop immediately. Jiwoo also yelled at In-hyuk to please not stop them from fighting. Jiwoo's sister approved of the fight and wanted to see them go all the way. In-hyuk couldn't believe what he was hearing. The president wanted to see which of the two was better. Even not knowing the kid, she thought he could do much better than that. That's not how In-hyuk saw things, but if the president was saying so, then he had to accept that order. In-hyuk thought the kid might have something special, so if that was the case, he understood and would let them continue. Jiwoo, even seeing his opponent gather that excess energy, charged at him. Despite this, the opponent dodged, but Jiwoo remembered the last time he saw his opponent make that same move. Jiwoo realized he was being copied. It was his movements from the beginning. Jiwoo knew he would be at a disadvantage if there was distance between them. Jiwoo thought he might have figured it out, and ended up learning something from this final fight. And the two began that clash of attack and dodge. But now both of their attacks were much more powerful. Jiwoo dodged quickly, making it so the opponent couldn't attack him directly. Jiwoo could no longer land a hit on the kid. He was no longer dodging the attacks. He was blocking and counterattacking. He would take distance to evade the attacks, and when he wanted to attack, he would get very close to his opponent. Jiwoo recognized the kid's impressive speed, but everything had its limits. He knew he was a contact fighter, and all he needed to do was let the kid come close and unleash a whirlwind. Even that tactic was no longer working, because Jiwoo was dodging, avoiding all the attacks thrown at him. He was dodging as quickly as during training with Kayden. Jiwoo wasn't just throwing punches randomly. He had a bigger plan behind everything, and when the kid tried to get even closer, he hesitated because he felt something holding him back. He didn't know what it was, but it prevented him from reaching Jiwoo. It felt like a wall made of wind. Jiwoo had used wind to create a barrier. When the awakened one has absolute control over their abilities, a trick like that is child's play. Jiwoo told him that now he would understand the distance between them and that he could never win. Jiwoo was confused because he hadn't been trained for that situation. Kayden knew that his opponent definitely had a lot of combat experience and was already picking up on Jiwoo's attack patterns. In-hyuk noticed that initially Jiwoo lost a bit of focus due to Jiwoo's unexpected movements, but now he had adapted well, and it seemed that things had become very difficult for Jiwoo. Their skill levels were not equal. Jiwoo launched an attack against his opponent. He sent him flying away, feeling every spark of wind as if it were piercing his body. The wind pushed him like tiny needles, piercing and tearing his skin and clothes. Jiwoo was down momentarily due to some injuries he sustained during the fight. In-hyuk lay desperate, calling Jiwoo's name, and to defend himself, Jiwoo said he hadn't done anything. It was the kid who wanted to fight him to the end. He also said that if he kept interfering like that, he really thought the kid would survive if he faced another awakened one. It was better for him to learn now than to die fighting someone unprepared. Kayden realized that he exploded his wind before Jiwoo could react, This didn't happen because the kid was unfocused during the fight. The president asked to take the kid to the infirmary, but what no one expected was that he would get up again and ask to continue fighting. He struggled with great effort to rise again because he didn't want the fight to end that way. He was visibly injured with scratches all over his body. In-hyuk begged him to stop. His opponent also said there was no reason to continue because if he did, he would get hurt badly. Nothing they said would deter his determination, as he was already standing in a fighting stance. In-hyuk was sure that his internal injuries were much worse than the external ones, and he didn't know how he was still able to stand. He understood what he felt but couldn't let this continue. However, Jiwoo said it was his decision and that he would keep fighting. He thanked them for worrying about him, but he could take care of himself. With great determination, he said he would fight to the end, leaving In-hyuk and Ji-young speechless. Kayden also didn't know how he could help him. As he fought, memories from his childhood came to mind when he couldn't show anyone his abilities. He was walking slowly, dragging his feet as if he didn't want to go anywhere, when he noticed a cat in the middle of the street, meowing alone, trembling with fear. He knew that if he stayed there, the cat could get run over by a car. Jiwoo was about to cross the street to grab the kitten when suddenly a truck came speeding by. That day, he used his abilities to save the kitten. He jumped quickly in front of the truck and, before the cat could be hit, he saved it. He looked at the little creature and asked if it was okay. Then he placed it on the ground, and the cat started rubbing against him. That day, the cat had almost been run over by the truck. But the boy's happiness didn't last long, as people nearby started commenting on the incident. Just hearing the comments about how a boy or girl appeared out of nowhere to save the cat made him freeze. He knew they were talking about him, and he had to get out of there as quickly as possible. He left the kitten in a safe place and hurried away from there. He felt guilty for having let someone see him using his powers. He was afraid that they would take him away, and his mother, always worried about him, noticed something was wrong and asked what was happening. Crying, he apologized, saying he was very scared and had done something wrong. He was locked in his room, and she wanted to come in. Those weren't the memories that came to his mind during the fight. That's why he wouldn't give up. He didn't have to hide from anyone anymore. Even if it was hard for Jiwoo to stand, he would. Even if his skin felt like it had been run over by a truck. Kayden was watching the boy rise slowly due to the pain he was feeling in his body. In-hyuk said it wasn't too late. He could give up and stop there. But the boy was tired of giving up and hiding from everyone. Now he would fight. In-hyuk didn't know what he wanted to prove in that fight, but he knew he wouldn't give up. Jiwoo also didn't understand why that kid was risking his life like that. But if that was what he wanted, he wouldn't back down in the face of such stubbornness. He began to gather energy again, and this time he wouldn't waste time. He would finish it with just one blow. Jiwoo was tired of this, and it would also be his way to help the kid prove whatever he wanted to prove. Jiwoo noticed that the energy he was accumulating was stronger than before. What power! And they were the same age. Jiwoo knew he needed to improve a lot. Jiwoo warned him that he didn't want to torture him, so he would finish everything with that one blow. The kid was very scared but wouldn't give up or dodge. If it hurt now, how much would it hurt when he landed that attack with all that power? Jiwoo remained in an attacking position and started to remember the training and conversations he had with Kayden in the basement. Kayden had said that he hadn't seen the guy with his own eyes, but from what he was telling him, he could guarantee that he wouldn't be able to win in his current state. Jiwoo remembered being sad to know that he wouldn't be able to win. However, his cat had an idea. He knew of a way and would tell him. At that moment, the boy became curious because he wanted to know what the way to win was. Kayden told him that his opponent would probably think he was an easy adversary, and that he needed to turn that to his advantage by not using his full powers during the fight, saving it for the right moment. And that would be the only chance he had. When the time came, he should analyze all the energy into a single attack and bet everything he had on it. Jiwoo knew that this was the only way to win, and that it couldn't be used more than once because enemies would be on alert the second time. Jiwoo had enough energy to unleash the attack. Jiwoo launched that attack with full energy at the boy. Kayden knew this was the only chance he would have to improve the outcome of the fight. Jiwoo was in a combat stance and established exactly what he needed to do. This time, he wouldn't dodge, because he still remembered the feeling he had when he needed to run away from someone out of fear of being discovered using his abilities. He no longer had to hide them. Kayden knew he was awakened, and he felt no shame. The power unleashed by Jiwoo exploded and headed toward Jiwoo. He received it and passed through it, leaving the two watching intrigued, thinking he should block or dodge. Even Jiwoo was unsure of Jiwoo's plan, until he felt him approaching out of nowhere and attacking him from the side. When he realized it, it was too late. There was nothing he could do. He was about to take that hit head-on with full force. Jiwoo didn't know how that kid had gotten so close to him to land that blow. Jiwoo put all his strength into a single attack and unleashed all his energy, hitting his opponent before he could even react because there wasn't time for that. This made Jiwoo's sister, who had remained neutral until that moment, widen her eyes and start sweating because her brother had been hit. And the blow was extremely strong, so strong that it shook the very foundation of the place. In-hyuk couldn't see the movements because it was too sudden. That was the speed. He was extremely fast. However, both of them saw that the boy was lying on the ground, writhing in pain. Kayden went to him to see how he was and to check closely the injuries and bruises he had sustained during the battle. Kayden was very proud of the boy. He thought he had done well. Jiwoo kept calling for Kayden simply to thank him again. At that moment, Kayden made a face and looked at Jiwoo with extreme affection for his attitude. In-hyuk dashed over to see Jiwoo, very happy because he was still on the ground, writhing. Jiwoo was on the other side, having been thrown into the wall, coughing. Jiwoo had strong pains in his abdomen. Jiwoo had caught him perfectly. He didn't know the kid could move at that speed. There wasn't even time for him to defend himself. Jiwoo was sure he wouldn't fall for that trick again. However, his sister arrived and said they couldn't continue. She warned that neither he nor the kid could go on anymore. Jiwoo couldn't move anymore. He was injured and very exhausted. His energy had been spent. His sister was very happy because she knew Jiwoo had learned a lot in that fight. She praised him and said he had done well. He didn't understand what she meant by learning a lot in that fight. Now she was heading toward the boy, who was being supported by In-hyuk because he had some really concerning wounds. Ji-young told the boy that his perseverance deserved respect. Jiwoo thanked her for enduring his stubbornness. Jiwoo called for Jiwoo. Jiwoo looked to see what the boy wanted with him. Jiwoo wanted to thank him for the fight. It was a very good experience for him. Jiwoo thought that kid had gone crazy. It was ridiculous to thank someone after taking a beating like that, but the boy was sincerely grateful. Jiwoo turned his face away from the boy and told him to stop being an idiot. In-hyuk had no idea how fast Jiwoo was. Especially the last blow was so quick that he couldn't even keep up. It couldn't be said that he had surpassed Jiwoo's powers, but considering that he had just discovered his awakened abilities, it was impressive. Ji-young was just listening to him speak and remembering how fast the boy could be. In-hyuk called out to her because he noticed she was lost in thought, in this case, memories. She looked over and asked how the boy was doing. In-hyuk replied that he should be awake by now. She stood up, causing him some confusion. Jiwoo was in the infirmary being treated for his injuries from the fight. He had some wounds but felt very down because he had lost again. However, this time he wasn't angry or frustrated like before. Instead, he felt at peace. His cat was nearby, eating a sachet. Jiwoo told Kayden that he felt he had finally become a true awakened, but Kayden reminded him that he had always been one. The boy smiled at that moment because he enjoyed talking to his cat. Jiwoo was in so much pain that he could barely move. He should be training his abilities instead of wasting time. So he started to practice accumulating energy while his cat sat in a corner of the bed, watching him train. Kayden liked seeing him train without needing to be forced. But then he sensed someone approaching, feeling energy, and told the boy to stop. Kayden warned him that he could stop because someone was coming. Jiwoo paid attention to the door to see who was about to enter, wondering who Kayden was talking about. It was In-hyuk, who entered saying he knew the boy was awake. Jiwoo was very happy to see him. His visits were always very pleasant. In-hyuk informed him that he had been unconscious for 2 days. Jiwoo was startled because 2 whole days was a lot. In-hyuk wanted to know how he was feeling. Jiwoo said he was in a lot of pain and could barely move. In-hyuk told him that he had broken 5 ribs and fractured 4 more, and in addition, he had scrapes all over his body. He looked at him kindly while saying this. Jiwoo had no idea the damage had been so severe. Kayden thought that was nothing. In-hyuk also didn't need to worry. It was a serious condition for an ordinary person, but he would recover in the blink of an eye. Jiwoo thanked them for their kindness in visiting him and for the information. In-hyuk wanted to continue talking to Jiwoo, But the only thing on his mind was that he really wanted to touch the cat. He even clenched his fist from the urge to touch that round, fluffy body just a little bit. He kept looking at Kayden, who didn't seem very friendly. In-hyuk was controlling himself as much as possible to stay away from the cat. Ji-young had a question for Jiwoo. She asked him if he had ever heard of someone named Kayden. The boy's eyes widened, and the cat turned to look at her, while In-hyuk wondered why she was bringing that up out of the blue. Kayden thought she might have noticed that the energy Jiwoo used at the end was related to him. He didn't think anyone would notice since it was such a small amount. He had no idea Ji-young was so perceptive. Jiwoo just stared at her in silence because he didn't know what to say that wouldn't jeopardize Kayden further. She was also staring at him, waiting for an answer. Jiwoo, who was pretending to be clueless, asked who this Kayden was. She asked if he really didn't know who he was. Jiwoo replied that he had never heard that name before. His words didn't seem to convince her. Jiwoo noticed that by looking at her, she was still staring at him. He wanted to ask one more question. He asked her what the cat's name was. Kayden imagined she was suspecting who he really was. Jiwoo almost said his name was Kayden. He sighed in relief and nearly revealed the cat's full name. Jiwoo sidestepped the situation by saying the cat's name was, which stood for casein nitrate. Kayden couldn't have been more upset because he hated the fake name the boy had come up with for him. In-hyuk found that name very original and felt even more inclined to squeeze the cat. Kayden was furious, glaring at the boy, while Jiwoo felt cornered. Ji-young told him that the name was quite unique and that the cat was always with him, unlike others. Jiwoo pretended to be clueless again but was sweating and had a dry mouth. In-hyuk asked why she wanted to know those things if there was something wrong with having a cat by a human's side. It was clear that most cats weren't like that, but there were exceptions. He said that was a dream for all cat owners, saying this with flushed cheeks as he was eager to pet that cat. He also mentioned that even the cold ones with their owners were very affectionate, and some wanted to get closer but could only watch from a distance. Meanwhile, Won was walking alone since after being taken by some agents along with Dr. Dallas. They concluded that all circumstances were favorable for the boy and let him go for now. However, he couldn't leave the neighborhood and would be under constant surveillance. Won wanted to know what would happen to Professor Dallas. He was told that the professor would face consequences for disobeying the laws. Won remained silent upon hearing that information but was deeply saddened. Won was back in the old class he attended before Jiwoo. Sitting in his seat, he heard several whispers from his classmates talking about him. Won looked to the side and noticed Jiwoo wasn't at school and didn't know what might have happened to him. Won, who had never spoken to anyone in that class, asked the classmate next to him if he knew where Jiwoo was. He replied that Jiwoo had been absent for about 5 days, which was roughly when Won also stopped coming. He recounted that the last time Jiwoo was there, some seniors came looking for both of them, and since that day, Jiwoo hadn't appeared again. After hearing that information, Won fell silent as the facts seemed confusing. Jiseok was sitting, still holding on to his ribs where Jiwoo had hit him. He remembered the fight, feeling irritated. He wanted a rematch as soon as Jiwoo got better. Then it came to his mind Jiwoo thanking him for fighting with him. Just remembering that still left him quite confused as to why someone would thank him for taking such a beating. His classmates arrived, asking why he hadn't gone to class that day, implying that something was wrong with him. Jiseok, who needed to sort some things out, had his friends asking what could have been so serious to leave him looking that way. Jiseok replied that it was none of their business. His friends talked about some other boys from different schools who were making moves and thought they would have visitors soon. Jiseok wasn't interested in that. He asked them to handle it on their own. He walked away from them and started to walk alone. His friends didn't understand what had happened to him, as he had been acting this way for some time. So the friends decided to hang out at the internet cafe because they wanted to get out and have some fun. Serious and angry, he approached Won. The boys were satisfied because they thought he was that crazy guy from the other school. In-hyuk was quite scared when he heard what Ji-young said about Jiwoo. She concluded that in Jiwoo's final move, his attack seemed to have traces of electrical abilities. In-hyuk couldn't believe he had 2 powers, electricity and high speed. In-hyuk said it was practically impossible. Without proper training, how could someone who had recently discovered he was an awakened do that? Ji-young said she wasn't mistaken. Even if it was for a brief moment, she was sure of what she had seen. Her words left him agonized. But when In-hyuk thought about it, he seemed to remember something. It sparked her curiosity as well, It seemed serious. In-hyuk hung his head, apologized, and said he would submit a report as soon as he returned. He hurriedly ran off to find out what was happening. Jiwoo was just observing everyone around, noting each movement. Even without saying anything, she knew exactly what was going on. At the hospital, Kayden was still oblivious regarding the boy with the ridiculous name he had encountered. Jiwoo trembled just seeing the cat at the head of the hospital bed looking at him. Kayden was very curious about what kind of name that was. How could someone be named casein nitrate? Jiwoo was at a loss for words but managed to think of something that started with. Kayden wanted to know what it meant. The boy said he had just heard it somewhere, but that only made things worse for him. Kayden was pondering the director's interest in him because she seemed to think he had some connection to the boy, probably due to the attack he used at the end of the fight to hit his opponent, even if there were only slight traces of electricity in it. Jiwoo asked if she could deduce their relationship based solely on that. Kayden didn't know if she could prove anything. The presence of electricity was very low, but this deduction showed Ji-young's real capability. Every time Kayden noticed his feline reactions, he felt very disappointed in himself. He had just realized he was frantically licking his paws. He was trembling with anger and decided to jump from where he was to another spot. He got into an attack position as someone approached with incredible speed. Whoever was coming was running and using their ability to move at that speed. The two stood ready, watching the door to see who would enter. It was In-hyuk again, arriving sweaty from running too much. Jiwoo, startled, asked him why he had come back. Angrier than he had ever been before, In-hyuk said he had gone to check something. Jiwoo didn't understand why he was staring specifically at Kayden. Jiwoo felt anxious, thinking In-hyuk might touch Kayden and that he might have discovered something about him. In-hyuk rummaged through his pockets, looking for something that seemed important. This only heightened the boys and the cat's apprehension. In-hyuk pulled out several sachets and canned food for the cat, saying he had forgotten to leave them with him earlier. Jiwoo felt relieved because it was just toys and treats for the little cat. In-hyuk said it was a gift for the casein nitrate. Kayden still hadn't gotten used to that name, but he certainly liked the gifts the guy brought. In-hyuk looked at the bicolor cat with great affection. Kayden was no longer holding the earlier sheet when he looked at that man. In-hyuk said goodbye to them, mentioning he was in the middle of something important when he remembered and returned to bring the gifts. Even as he left, he made a funny face and waved goodbye to the cat. Kayden was extremely furious with those strange gestures. In-hyuk returned to finish the meeting with the director. He mentioned that he had forgotten to give the gifts he bought for the casein nitrate. She found it odd that he wanted to bring gifts for the cat. Meanwhile, Jiwoo was somewhere feeling sharp pains. His ribs hurt from the blow he had taken. He paused and thought about what he had told his classmates, that he wasn't interested and that they should do it alone. For a moment, he thought he might be neglecting his classmates that day. Then he dismissed it, feeling very tired. Woon was with Jiwoo's 3 friends to get some answers from them. The boys even tried to joke around, saying they missed him and that things were more fun with him around. One brave kid put his hand on his shoulder and looked him in the eyes, saying he wouldn't escape. That was the first one to receive a cross to the face. He fell and stayed on the ground. The other 2 tried to retaliate but knew they couldn't match him. Furious, he demanded to know what they had done with Jiwoo. Their strength was ridiculous compared to Woon's training and awakened power. They tried to confront him, but it was in vain. They defended themselves and counterattacked. All of it lasted little because the boys were very weak. When the 2 were already on the ground, the third asked Woon to wait a bit because he had something to say. He revealed that it was Jiwoo who had taken his friend, and since that day, he hadn't returned to school, and they didn't know what had happened. Woon's expression darkened even further upon hearing that name. The boy confirmed that was indeed the name, and that he took Jiwoo somewhere to teach him a lesson. That was the last time they saw their friend. Woon remained silent, thinking about what they had told him, that the boy only reacted after they said they would go after him. Jiwoo's friend even offered to call him, saying he was just there moments ago. Woon had no time for that. He wanted to settle the score as quickly as possible. But he didn't believe Jiwoo had lost to those fools. They would never be able to lay a hand on him. His thoughts were interrupted when a very rude voice asked what that kid was doing there. It was Jiwoo, who realized he had been neglecting his classmates and returned to talk more with them, only to come across that situation. Looking at Woon, He recognized him as the weird guy from another time. Jizyuk said it was quite interesting and asked if he was the one who did that. Won wanted to know if his name was Jizyuk, but the guy insisted he answer the question he had just asked. With a very displeased expression, Won asked him again if his name was Jizyuk. Noticing that the guy wanted to fight, he found it amusing. Calling Won an idiot, he stated his name was Jizyuk Yun. At that moment, Won walked towards Jizyuk with a serious expression.